if we can possibly get going. I was going to do apologies for absence.
We've just got apologies from Councillor Andy Brown.
And moving on with the standard items, minutes of the meeting, last meeting, are we happy with those? Any changes? I've got a very and a nod from Councillor Barrett. Is that okay? All right. Councillor Staveley, you were last day. Are the minutes all right? Right, excellent. Declarations of interest. Looking around, nobody waving at me. Public participation. We've got 2 members of the public wanting to speak, but one specific to the petition at item 9. So I'm mindful that we take that at that point rather than now. So if I can call on Mr. Rothwell to come and, I think we've all got your speech in front of us, but if you come present, please. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Hi, my name is Edwin Rothwell. I've set up a community interest company called Heart of Skipton with the primary aim of supporting community events, and I'll be taking the lead on the Pride celebrations for 2025 in Skipton. I'm pleased to say planning for this event is coming together. My question is separate to that. So the CIC that I run has a vision to move into community housing and regeneration projects in Skipton. So I just wanted to draw the committee's attention to the regeneration area identified in the Craven local plan as SK139. I do have an image of it in case anyone's not familiar with that. I don't know if it's possible to put that on the screen. It's on the back of the sheet, great. I believe now is the right time for site assembly to take place to ensure that regeneration happens. And the question is, why now? Well, the lease on B&M Retail is due to expire in July 2026, and that represents about half of the SK139 regeneration area. So if B&M renews the lease for another 10 years, we will not be able to see regeneration take place because the local plan will not permit a piecemeal approach. Failure to act now will see the town lose the advantages of regeneration, lose the economic potential of the site, and lose a housing opportunity, which I'm going to come on to. The Craven local plan stated, but to quote it, site assembly powers will be considered for use where it is expedient, appropriate, and necessary for regeneration to succeed. But we do have a need for housing, and all the best development land in Skipton is council owned and tied up with car parking. The car parks are sprawling surface level sites which are relatively economically inefficient compared to a multi-storey, for example. The north and west sides of Coach Street car park could become an area of housing, which is onto image 2. Which is my drawing. We would create this housing by taking control of SK139 and building a public multi-storey car park on the B&M site where we can decant the car parking from Coach Street to enable housing. This would be combined with the wholesale regeneration of Cavendish Street, Waller Hill bus station and a wheelchair accessible Gallows Bridge. The creation of a civic square on either Waller Hill or Cavendish Street would provide a much needed event space, and this will reduce high street closures, boost economic activity by allowing large scale events to take place on the same day as the market, providing a double hit of visitors. The economic advantages are huge. I'd like to ask that you would work with me to look at feasibility and community engagement around this regeneration project, and I believe these new uses will satisfy the usage criteria set out in the Craven local plan, which is, to quote, complement and underpin the role and function of this part of Skipton whilst supporting the town centre as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You've got a response from officers, haven't you, David? So,
in order to realise the planned housing and employment growth set out in the Craven local plan, policy SP5, Spatial Strategy for Skipton, sets out a number of site allocations to meet the needs in the town. The Craven local plan supports proposals for development subject to compliance with the development principles for each site set out in the policy. Site SK139, land east and west of Cavendish Street, Skipton, is identified as a retail-led mixed-use opportunity regeneration site, offering potential to enhance this part of the town, meeting retail, commercial and leisure requirements, in addition to providing environmental improvements and enhanced connections in the town. Specific development principles for this site relate to flood risk, heritage, the proximity of the Leeds-Liverpool Canal to the site, and access. In addition, the policy requires a master plan to be produced for the site in consultation with key stakeholders and to the satisfaction of the local planning authority. The aim of this master plan is to incorporate each development principle and ensure there is a comprehensive approach to the regeneration of this area. Proposals will then be expected to accord with the principles of it. In accordance with the policy, the former Craven District Council commissioned the preparation of a master plan encompassing both sites SK139 and site SK140. Second site allocated in the Craven local plan as a regeneration opportunity. Following local government reorganisation and the creation of the combined authority, the council is developing a process and will undertake a review of town centre master plans across North Yorkshire, including Skipton, which will involve public consultation and which we hope Edwin Rothwell will engage with. The policy recognises that the area is within a range of ownerships, including North Yorkshire Council, that assembling the site will influence delivery timescales, and that site assembly powers will be considered for use where necessary. The council is committed to working with landowners, developers and interested groups to ensure the opportunity to regenerate this area in line with Craven local plan policy is realised.
Thank you.
So I think just from my point of view as well, with the pre-Craven hat on, it's just to say that, you know, there's been, the master plan has been there. We did draft that up. We do want to see that area redeveloped into not necessarily better use, but maybe alternate use to what it is currently. However, it is an employment site, and we have to be very, very careful removing employment sites from out the city centre. People's jobs rely on that site currently. So I do think that it is a consultation exercise. I do think the timing, probably because of local government reorganisation, the new mayoral office. I was in a meeting with the mayor yesterday, and he is being spread very thin across the entire of North Yorkshire and York. The projects are there. So there is a master plan there. It does exist. It's about us bringing that forward. I think as this committee matures, I think we'll be better at delivering things like that and bringing things forward. But it's a bit, timing is an issue just at the moment for us to go whole hog into this and move forward. I've got Councillor Myers, who's Executive for Housing at the County Council.
Yeah, just to say, I bumped into Mr. Rothwell a few weeks ago, and this reminded me about our work on the master plan for Skipton. So I did speak the next day to Nick Hart, who's the director responsible for my portfolio, but also for regeneration, and flag this up with him. So I think it will be looked at again. Chair is quite right in terms of capacity at the moment, but these opportunities present themselves occasionally, and you have to see whether you can achieve something. So it has been flagged up. Thank you for bringing it up again, and we won't lose sight of it. But I don't have an answer, but I've asked the question.
Thank you.
You are allowed a supplementary if you'd like on.
No, that's all good. Thank you very much for the input and responses. Thank you.
Carry on. So moving further on into the meeting, oh, sorry, Councillor Heseltine then, and then Councillor Staveley, if we're carrying on.
That presentation, that it mentions that B&M, who have just spent vast amount of money upgrading and modernising their store. It's absolutely magnificent what they've provided. It's greatly loved. It gives a lot of local employment. And surely there's an existing employment side. B&M's future has to be respected, whatever's done. Just don't see this as an excuse to throw them out of town.
And it never has been. And like I said, there is employment and there's jobs there that must be considered. So, Councillor Staveley, briefly.
No, I was just going to say it's just encouraging that sort of the community themselves are coming forward in such a positive manner and constructive manner. I mean, obviously there's been a slight gap, should we say, between as the transition from Craven District into the new unitary authority has taken place, but I think it's good that there's that energy in the community. And on the point of B&M, I mean, I dare say there's market traders in Skipton who might not be quite as enamored towards B&M, but you know, that's a commercial issue, I dare say, but it's just worth noting that there's only so much trade to go around, and maybe in some ways when markets start to find their market, their customers difficult to find, it doesn't help when there's somebody open 7 days a week or 6 days a week in such a commercial setting, competing directly against them.
Anyway, we've always wandered off into a debate in public. So talking of debates in public, item 5, exclusion of the public. In item 12, are we happy to second? Looking around for nods, yeah, everybody happy, thank you. Which then moves on to item 6, which is Airedale Hospital and the rebuild, which is currently still ongoing. And Eleanor, I believe you're here to talk us through the latest stages. Thank you.
Not used to all this fancy equipment because we work in the NHS. Hi all. I've been speaking to David, but I know I haven't met any of you. So I'm Eleanor Noster. I'm the Head of Communications Engagement for the Securing the Future programme. And I know previously my colleague Fran has come, I think, and updated you on how we're doing. So we sent some information out before about how we're sort of approaching the programme. We've been trying to explain to people about very much being on the journey to the new hospital, which came from being conscious people sort of expect to see the diggers moving in straight away and getting on with things. But there's an awful lot happening, even though you won't be seeing the diggers. You might be seeing a lot of work going on because we're still dealing with the rack situation and all those repairs. So we've tried to set it out so that people are very clear about the different stages we're going through, and also so people can know where they'll be able to get involved, hopefully all the way through, but particularly when we're going to be designing the actual hospital. I know the committee's been very supportive about the need for the new hospital, which we're very grateful for. As you're all very aware of the rack situation, and that puts us under a huge amount of pressure to do this in a very short amount of time. I think the average for building a new hospital was 12 to 15 years, and we're obviously trying to do it nearer to 6. So it's a massive challenge, and it does mean we're not really following that very neat linear process. So the bit that I was mainly going to be updating you on today is the work that's got to take place to get ready for building the hospital. So obviously everybody's very interested in what the hospital will be going to look like, but before we can even start that, because we're doing it on the same site, we've got to do an awful lot of preparatory work. And hopefully you'll have seen things about the new car park that we're looking at building, which is part of it. But it's a bit of a jigsaw. So you'll know the Airedale site. We're very, very long spread out. We're very fortunate with the beautiful rural setting. And the current hospital, which we will be keeping going and still trying to provide very high quality services for patients all the way through this process. But there's very limited amount of space left on the site to build on. So we will be having to do some clearing work, and the car parking in particular is like a giant sort of jigsaw puzzle of moving things around to accommodate getting construction traffic in and make sure that patients in particular and our staff but can continue to park all the way through and get access to the treatment they need. So the bit that we're at now is sort of the technical bits, the enabling works, but we've just talked about getting the site ready. And the main bit, David, if we've come on to things we've sort of been talking about before we start putting planning permission in. So there's the multi-storey car park, which hopefully will really improve things for people, because we've picked up an awful lot of feedback in our conversations about that's a real challenge for people and can add to a stress or make an experience unnecessarily stressful if you're trying to find spaces when it's at a premium. The other thing that we're looking at doing is creating new access roads. So initially that will be to separate construction traffic, but it will mean the hospital has 2 exits and entrances. Building a new electricity substation. This is quite a major one. We've got to bring in a lot of extra power for the hospital, particularly as we're keeping the current one running. So we're on with the conversations with Northern Power about that, but it will require a new substation to be built. And one of the other things we have to do is we're having to take down, I don't know if you're familiar with what we call the day hospital. It's sort of a newer bit that's sort of been added on to the main hospital, and that bit's got to come down to make way for some of the other work. So then we're jigging services around where we can find space, hopefully on site. We're also looking at some mainly corporate and support functions, whether we could move people off site temporarily while the work takes place. And as part of that, it will mean the nursery that we currently have for staff will need to move to a new location. So we could move on, David, please. So just to give you sort of an overview of the site, the striped bit is where we're looking at where we think the new hospital and the building zone that goes around it, and all the construction work will take place. And as you can see, the new car park, prominently, that's on what was currently car park 3. The other change is that to make way for the entrance road, we will need to take down, there's a block of housing that's staff accommodation. So the majority of it is in something called Teal House, which is just to the left of the car park, which will be remaining. But there's 6 terraced houses that will need to come down to make way for the entrance. And then the other elements we talked about are on the other side of the site of the substation and the location for the nursery. So just to give you a feel of how it all sits together, and as you know, what we were talking about there is just how much the current hospital spreads as a long and low building. Could move on. So just about the car park, we have done hopefully, you know, a lot of your constituents will have been involved in this as well, but a lot of work to get the design for the car park. This isn't so much an artist impression as just to give people a feel for the scale and size, because the main bit that it will look like is one of the questions we're asking people, which is around the cladding and the look of it. But it's trying to sort of show some of the things that there'll be that we're responding to feedback that people have given us, things like the solar panels, security and the digital features. And then again, which we'll come on to later, but very conscious of the sort of rural aspect and trying to maintain trees, planting and keep a bit of screening up. Move on, David, please. So just some other of the sort of impressions about what we're talking about, and this is particular sort of the impact of what the car park will look like to some of the houses adjoining us. Move on. But I'm just getting used to glasses, so I'm a bit in and off on these. So some of the main things we've heard back from people about the car park that we've incorporated into design and sharing, there's a particular thing, I don't think you'd be surprised about the size of the car park spaces. I think we all know size of cars today and everything, put that as make that even harder, and at Airedale that's definitely the case. So as well as that, we are meeting obviously the new standards for that, but they're actually going to be even wider than that. So hopefully it'll make it really easy for people to get in and out. People are particularly fed back about making it as easy as possible to get from the car park to the hospital and around the car park, and things like step-free access to make sure that we're taking account of accessibility standards. Again, you'd probably be familiar with the main visitor car park at Airedale, which has those steps going down, which I know a lot of people struggle with. So we're trying to make sure we can do better than that with the new world. And of course, there will be dedicated parking for our staff. Just moving on. Some of the other things that people told us about, that feeling of safety coming from, you know, making sure it's very well lit and CCTV coverage. We're adding in toilets that people have requested, and there's going to be spaces for bikes as well, and motorbikes, and also electric vehicle charging points. So we've had an awful, you know, again, we've had an awful lot of suggestions around it, and wherever possible, we've tried to incorporate that. And then the final part of people's views is very much around what that cladding will look like. And it's some of the things we're asking people around, where there's some options to do that, whether it's sort of trying to make it, you can't really make a car park blend into the environment, can you? But you can make it reflect the scenes and everything. And we've been looking at some designs around that. Just moving on about the environmental aspect. Just move on one day. So this again was a common theme that we heard, because people really do value that, both staff, you know, the local residents, people using it, is the green aspects of the site. So we really are working hard on that. We've obviously got the sort of more environmental friendly things like the solar panels, but then there's a lot of tree planting going on. We're looking at possibly from one of the contractors donating a large number of trees, which will be more than we can accommodate on the site, but we're talking to local communities about anywhere else we could put them. Very much using local planting and woodland appropriate for the environment, and then looking at things like the habitats for wildlife, insect hotels, bird boxes, bat boxes. We've got them all, hedgehog houses. So we may well be doing something with the local school as well around that, because the children there have been very interested in that, as you'd expect. So just moving on to the other elements. So these, again, until we actually are working directly with Northern Power, we won't have a final design, but this is to give people the impression and understanding of what it looked like. We're talking about a series of sort of individual, I suppose, almost like boxes really, but they are single story. And they sort of, again, we're going to try and make sure they're landscaped as well as possible. Are we using landscaping to screen them? One of the things we've been assuring people about is there is no sort of huge noise coming from this substation, because you can understand a lot of local residents would be concerned about that, and also about lighting and what that might mean for people. But these are things, the lighting is internally because it's for when people are using it, so there's not going to be big floodlights around it, and there won't be noise coming from it. So moving on to the new access road. Again, this is something we're getting a lot of feedback about. So if anyone's sort of been around, again, the traffic build up around the hospital is problematic at times. So while this will initially be for construction traffic, and we're trying to keep, if you remember that map I showed you at the beginning, the sites are almost divided in half while it works, half with the building and then the other bit where so patients can still access the hospital safely. This then will become a second route exit and entrance once the new hospital's in place. And again, we're widening the road around the hospital that will be there. It's a lot of it is single one way at the moment, so we're widening that as well to improve the traffic flow and people coming in, and this will hopefully also help it for emergency vehicles to access as well. Just move on to the final bit about the nursery. So this is more really, we've just been alerting people because we don't have the plans for this, but we just wanted, again, people to have the whole picture of what was going on the site. So it's the location really that we've been making sure people are aware of, which is in the car park. It's a staff car park that's opposite the current A&E. So again, up against one of the boundaries, and that's where we're looking at planning the nursery. That's at the moment being sort of designed based on the feedback from the nursery staff, and we'll be doing some sort of work around that once we actually have some plans to share. So in a nutshell, that's what's been going on. We've been asking people about it. We've had exhibitions at the trust. Obviously, it's a planning process. A lot of that's focused on local residents. So we've had roadshows in local venues, but then we've tried to widen that out right across our communities with survey and wide promotion of it. Hopefully, you've seen it in local press. And again, we're getting some really good responses to that. We have done quite a lot of activity with local residents at some extra meetings, and also been walking around the streets. That doesn't sound quite right, but walking around, knocking on people's doors to give them a chance to talk about the plans and ask us any questions they have. So I will pause there. That's the main part, obviously, of our focus at the moment, but quite happy to see where we can, if we can answer any questions about what else is happening with the hospital or anything else you want to know.
Just for me, the phasing, obviously, that looks like there's car parking disappearing. So does the car park go first before the substation goes up on the car park and the nursery goes up on the car park, or?
Yes, so the substation won't be on a car park area. That's still opposite the car park 1, which will be staying. That's the one with the stairs going down and some of that. So they won't be affected. The bit that the car parking that will be affected in phases is round the back and the side of the hospital where the new one is. So the reason that day hospital is coming down is to make temporary car parking that can be used while we build the main car park, which will be built in 2 phases, 2 parts. So that we can manage parking on site.
Oh, that's good. Councillor Brown and Councillor Staveley.
Yes, good morning to you. Just a couple of points. Could I just ask, this has all been approved now by the government, has it? This development that's going to take place?
What, this work or the hospital?
The hospital and the works.
So we're at the stage where we've been as one of the RAC hospitals. We're outside of the review that's going on, so we've been told to proceed with the plans.
Excellent.
We haven't submitted the first request for funding with the strategic outline case that's gone in yet.
Right.
But we are, yes, we've been told to proceed.
My second is a bit of information from you, if you wouldn't mind circulating it. I'll declare an interest that I'm a trust governor for the Harrogate and District Foundation Trust, but I don't know the area that this hospital is going to serve geographically, and it would be useful to have a map to see which part of the community you're going to be serving from this hospital.
Yes, absolutely, we can send that. I'll just let me make a note, but we've got it's the same catchment area. It will still be coming into Skipton and Craven.
I know what that is.
Absolutely, yeah.
It would be very useful to have that. Thank you.
Huge, needless to say, Nick, from East Lancashire, right the way around. But Councillor Staveley.
Yeah, thank you. And because this is basically a complete reorganisation of this site and the service it provides from that site. Where are the discussions about some of the off-site changes to provision? Because I know that has been something that's been ongoing. Because obviously there are off-site provisions sort of supported by Airedale in some of the further reaches of the district. Where are we at with that, do you know?
Are you thinking Skipton Hospital? Are those
Skipton
sort of-
Hospital, Castleberg Hospital, etc.
Yep. So at the moment, we're not, there's no changes planned with any of that at the moment. We're not at the stage where we're re-looking at the actual design of the hospital and definitely what will be in it. The premise is that it's a like for like, that we're just, it's just replacing the building because of RAC. We will be looking there's a lot of work that's going on at the moment with individual services to look at how they provide care to patients, improvement, service, general service improvement that would be coming in over the next few years. Because obviously we're talking about trying to make sure we're ready for like 2030, 2040 as well. That's the strategies we're doing. So we aren't specifically looking at the services in any of those premises. If the concern is that you're worried they're moving, is that what?
Well, rather hoping that they'll be developed. Obviously,
Right.
there's a fashion within the health service to start bringing things back out to communities.
Yes.
Because clearly you're not just round the corner from
No,
a
absolutely.
large number of the residents of Craven who obviously we're representing. So
Yes.
an update as that progresses would be useful. I
Yes,
think, for all
definitely.
members, but particularly members in the affected
Yeah,
areas.
yeah. So I suppose the short answer is we're not at the sort of stage where we're looking at that level of detail, but just to assure you very much, and the approach is, particularly with the latest sort of direction from government as well, is about looking at what we're doing in community and what should be in the hospital and what would be better being moved out. So that's one of the things where we're looking at to have some of the services being affected by needing to take down that area I mentioned. The idea is that we keep everything clinical on site unless that we're actually feeling there's something that would make more sense for patients to be provided elsewhere in the community in one of our other settings to look at that. So those are some of the conversations that are happening at the moment. But in terms of the overall picture, we're not quite there yet.
Councillor Nolan. Or Councillor Barrett, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Myers.
I know I missed a meeting or two, Chairman, but never mind. No, I mean, this is probably coming at a later stage anyway, but I know at previous area committees, we've talked about other modes of transport, i.e. The links to the railway station, connectivity there, because we are all people who live nearby the hospital now know the issues around traffic, etc.
Yes.
And I just wondered if there's anything you could tell us about that side, links to the railway station, connected with obviously going to be bus. Is anything been thought about on that front to try and, I know the car parks are very good for revenue, but they're very good for frustration and motorists as well, but other modes of transport, which is relatively nearby.
Yep.
And what the thoughts were on that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's some of the questions we've asked people about what would encourage them not to drive and other modes of transport and what we could do. So there's things like you'll see about the bikes I mentioned. There's a lot more spaces and accommodation for cyclists, for example. There's no plans to change the buses that we're aware of that currently serve the hospital, and that will be factored in to the plans we've got. In terms of we're working with, it'd be Bradford Council mainly on the green transport strategy and looking at what we have to deliver as part of that. In terms of the railway, that's a tricky one because we can't do anything. It's on private access to private land, but sorry, no, is that not what you wanted? Yeah, no, I was just going to say one of the things that's been raised with us as well, this is probably more relevant to people directly in the area, in the Skipton area, but is the access from the station to the hospital and whether that could be improved. So we are going to be raising that with council and discussing, and hoping to work with Skipton and Eastbourne Parish Council on that as well, because that's a concern they've been raising. So we're trying to, where we can, obviously some of those aren't in the gift of the trust, but we're trying to have those conversations.
Yeah, that's fine, as long as those conversations are taking place.
Yes.
I thought there would be.
Yeah.
But I mean, whether it just be, I mean, there's obviously a bit of the interchange, for a better expression, with down at the railway station now with the buses, etc. But I'm sure that could be made far, far better as well. Because even though if we've got some, if you walk from there, it's quite a way, even if you walk along the bottom of the valley. But I mean, if you can improve the bus connections with the station, etc. Because I think it's pretty poor, pretty grim. That's just in general. But I think there's a lot could be done there, Chairman, as well, to try which should help in the situation.
That's a very, very fair point. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
So no.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to back up Councillor Barrett's point. I've made the point about the railway before here and the scrutiny health. And you say that land is private. I I don't see what's stopping if the government really wanted to enable travel by railway in a greener fashion. If you imagine you're living, I don't know, right up Bentham, you might have to drive to a station. How do you get to Airedale? Well, you go all the way down. It's a mile walk from Stilton railway station. And if you think most people go to the hospital are ill,
Yes.
or immobile in some way, and probably predominantly older as well. So I don't think it's beyond the wits of government to put a railway station. I think Councillor Barrett said this Silton was put in the wrong place anyway, and he should know this is a division. I don't know beyond. I think it could be done, but I don't think there's any effort being put towards that. I've read through. I put comments to the survey as well, and there's no mention anywhere of how people get to the hospital. There's a car park. There's no mention of how. There's congestion if you go to the area, and I've been to the hospital a few times. How have I got there? Once, twice by bus, sometimes by train, but it's a mile walk up the hill, round the corner, down the hill. It's not a very accessible site, so I'm pleased you're going to make it more accessible. But I just think a railway station feasibility study should be done. It obviously going to cost tens of millions, but the hospital's going to cost hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And it'll be there for future. And I'm thinking of not just patients, outpatients, inpatients, but the workers. We have asked, I think, Andy Soloway, Councillor Soloway there, we talked about trying to get a cycle route down the A629 down the side, and we've Andy's pushed for that. And I know you've got employees who cycle from Skipton. But they use the canal, which is not great if you're walking your dog and you've got a doctor cycling at 25 miles an hour down the canal to get to work. But so we've asked for a different route. So no mention. Now, we've had a recent email from Lancashire, and they say they're going to put some new hospitals in Lancashire, Preston and somewhere else, and they're going to be state-of-the-art net zero carbon facilities. State-of-the-art net zero carbon facilities. Now, that's a really solid promise. You couldn't work your way out of that. This promises environmentally friendly and sustainable. Sort of fluffy stuff we hear at planning. It's not much of a promise, is it? You say that you can't get the car park to blend in. Well, you can. If you go to Europe, often multitude of car parks. I don't know if everybody's seen. You've got plants going up the side of the car parks with a grid, so you could shield them. There is a on one of them. You've got page 11. You've got a multi-story car park hiding behind 3 or 4 trees. I think I could just pick it out. I think they've shaded the car park into white and grey, but I don't think those trees are hiding that car park in any shape or form. That's page 11. Just a couple more points. I agree. Councillor Stavy's point made a very good point about Skipton General. We know Diney House in Skipton is really struggling on a really small site, and it's the partners are struggling to sort of raise the funds to expand it, but it's not a good site. Now, if you go for your bloods, you don't go for your blood test down at Skipton General anymore. That's come back into GPs. So, could some sort of feasibility study, sort of thing, Councillor Staveley mentioned, there's some to better use of Skipton General. I wouldn't want it sold off. I think there's a big demand. And also you've got 12, 15, 18,000 people in that area. Why get them to go down the valley to the general hospital when they could be seen locally? This sort of point Councillor Staveley made. And that. I like the solar panels. I think the multi-storey car park is a good thing. People are surprised to hear that from the Green, but I think it's good use of the land. So I think it's a good point. Also, the last one I make is paying what people ask for. I bet they didn't ask to pay at the exit, did they? I bet they asked to not pay. Now, I visited my dad the other day, and it was £25 after an hour and a half to park at the hospital. And car parking is a massive problem for people. Is there any way that the solar panel revenue could be used to offset? Will the car parking still be run by a private firm? It's a big problem for people visiting hospitals and working at a hospital.
Car parks aren't run by a private firm.
No, are they?
No, or £25 for an hour and a half. But definitely
I
not.
bet they didn't ask to pay.
No, we did have a lot of feedback about payment. There isn't any plans, to change which is a national policy about charging for car park at Airedale. The money from parking goes to sustaining the car parks and maintenance, security, lighting, and those sorts of things. Yes, people, have asked, and what we've said we would do is do some more work with people around concerns about charges, payment methods. People did said it would be better to pay on exit because it meant they paid for what they'd used rather than trying to pre-guess it. So that was genuinely what people had said. Just going back to your point about asking about transport, we did that in the initial feedback. We did some in March and the summer where we had all those conversations about what else would encourage people, methods of transport. The main one was people wanted to travel by car predominantly because of the convenience when you're not feeling well, as some people have said, that they just wanted something that got them there very quickly and conveniently. But we are sort of raising and sharing the feedback around other suggestions around buses, trains, cycling, and improving pedestrian access with council so that we can look at whether anything can be done around that.
Right, a third of our residents don't have cars.
Yeah, I know. I'm just telling you what they've said in our surveys. Yeah.
Myers.
I was rather losing the will to live. David Nolan thinks. I'm not going to say what I was going to say, and I'll talk to David Stabley about Skipton General and Provision in Set, because I sit on the York and North Yorkshire, whatever else, Health and Wellbeing Board, and I've raised it a few times. So no, I'm just in awe of Councillor Nolan's idea that in a time when money to local government, money for essential services, half the hospital building programme has been cancelled, he thinks that the country can afford to build a new station to serve Airedale Hospital. We're very lucky to have a new hospital being developed. It isn't a question of what our wish lists are. It's a question of what can be afforded by the country. So, I welcome the investment here. I'm very glad it hasn't gone the way of many other new hospitals. I think we're very fortunate in a way to have a place riddled with wreck, because otherwise I would be seeing out my days with a failing hospital down the road. So I'm glad of that. Thank you.
Councillor Soloway.
Just two questions. One, there seems to be a lot more hard surfacing going into this. That area is affected by floods. Is there enough flood alleviation on it? I do welcome this development. I'm just asking those questions. And secondly, as someone who's often gone down there with wheelchair accessible vehicles, I'm hoping that you're going to improve that, because so many the patient transport arrangements down there, they're not that good at it. So I'm encouraged to hear if that's going to be improved.
It is, yeah, that's a very important part, and something we're doing some more work with people with accessibility issues and things to make sure we get it, improve it. One of the things we're looking at is as well is increased drop off and short stay right near to the hospital once we know where that is and how we're using the rest of the site. And so that's not just about physical, but people who may have carers for people, for example, Alzheimer's, dementia, people who need to be able to go in with them, but they may all have physical issues, so they can't be dropped off ahead. And we got quite a lot of feedback actually from people with young children as well about the difficulties of, getting pushchairs. It's not the same as the accessibility, but out of cars, the spaces, and being able to get there sort of quickly. So that's something we will be doing extra work on. But you're absolutely right, it needs improving very much around the accessibility side, and that's something we're very conscious of. Oh, yes, sorry. It distracted me with the accessibility. Yes, absolutely. There's been a huge amount of work done in that as part of all the surveys, and that was done towards as well to help us work out where the new hospital needed to go, where we could build, where it was safe to do, what the factors would be around that. And certainly with the car parks, there's been a massive amount of work done around the drainage and flooding side. And we do sort of, because obviously that's something the residents are particularly concerned around as well, whether there's impact onto them. So yes, there has been a lot done about that.
Councillor Staveley, briefly.
Yeah, thank you. Just picking up on the point about net zero hospitals. I mean, to be brutally honest, I'm more interested in hospitals saving lives than saving the planet. So if it comes down to a slightly less green version of a hospital that's better equipped, I think that would get my vote. And just picking up on Councillor Myers' point, I think we should, although Julian, our MP isn't going to be here today, but I think we need to be very thankful that he's been able to continue his lobbying to support this project, because obviously a change in government has made it a slightly harder sell, especially given the financial hiding that our local authorities just received from the new government. So I think the fact we've been able to maintain this sizable project, I think it's a credit to all concerned. I say that's, I know Julian's been at the forefront of that along with others. So, thank you. Brief enough.
Just to add on that we are extremely grateful. We've all four of our, I mean, obviously we've got a couple of new MPs, but have been very supportive about hospital. And, you know, as the committee has itself, you've written the letters for us, as have others in support. So we really recognise that. And it is about getting a new hospital for the community. So all the support of people together is very much appreciated.
No, thank you, and thank you for the work, and keep it going, really. I mean, the sooner the better with that hospital being delivered. The metal poles and the building works outside don't make it a pleasant place to be a patient at the moment. So it really does need to get on as fast as possible. So keep going, keep up the work, and you continue to have the support of this committee in delivering that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. On that note, we'll move on to the next item, which is item 7, and it's an update on the roadworks at Keckskill. Richard, are you? It's coming online, I believe. So we've got Richard Binks to give us this update. Welcome, Richard.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this forum. So I'm the Head of Major Projects and Infrastructure for North Yorkshire Council. So within the team, we look after all the big capital works interventions. We look after bridges and structures, the main civil engineering works, the regeneration projects in the town centres, and also now we're doing electric vehicle infrastructure charging. But the largest job of all, of course, is Keckskill. So I have a PowerPoint presentation I can share with you this morning. If you allow me to upload it. Can you see that?
It's a bit small on the TV, but we've all got it in our packs. That's improved.
Right, okay, so if you're fine, I'll make a start. Well, the opening sheet, as you can see, is an aerial view of the existing A59 pass. We do actually have a drone, which we send up on a regular basis to take aerial photographs of the site and progress and the existing terrain. On the left-hand side is the site compound for the works. Conveniently, it's shielded from public view behind the bund, which was the Sibelco quarry, and all the hard standing was essentially there from the quarry, so it was very, very convenient indeed. So it's quite a substantive base up there, quite a modern office complex, which people don't tend to know about, fully furnished, as you can see, full parking amenity and the site store. And off in the distance, you can see the temporary haul road we've had to create to access the actual working face. You all know what it is, I'm pretty sure of that, but just in case you don't, the Keckskill project itself is situated in the A59 between Skipton and Harrogate. The A59 itself is one of the principal east-west links across England. It's the second one down from Scotch Corner on that big project there. So it's a very key east-west link, and that's why it's been supported by the Department for Transport and a significant grant funding. The OS map at the bottom has more detail. It's probably one of the highest peaks on the Pennine Hill chain. The terrain is obviously very hospitable up there. It takes a long time to get up there, from all the personnel, etc. But that's what we're doing. I term it the Côte de Blubber Houses. I am a cyclist myself. I'll throw that one into the ring. So it was a banner moment when the Tour de France went over there back in 2014. It certainly drew the crowds. Just an interest piece there. So the scheme is, we think, the largest highway scheme that the council has ever undertaken, and that includes the county council. It's massive. The statistics are quite impressive. It's a 27-hectare site. The new highway is 4 kilometres in length. It's not just a road though. There are 12 new structures in all that, including big retaining walls, underpasses for the bridleway, culverts for the network of watercourses there. We've had to take down over 3 kilometres of dry stone walling. We're building back 4. And there's actually 8 different types of traditional dry stone walling up there, and we're meticulously taking that down and building it in the traditional styles with people who are experts in the field. The vegetation clearance has been 64,000 square metres. That's all the bracken, the miscellaneous coppices of trees, etc. There's going to be 6 kilometres of fencing. The VRS, the crash barrier in essence, there's going to be 3 kilometres of that. There's going to be 9 kilometres of drainage pipes. Utilities, that's your fibre optic cables, your BT, your gas, your Yorkshire Water. There's going to be 12 kilometres of cable diversions, etc. Excavation-wise, it is a big earthwork scheme in essence. There's 370,000 cubic metres of material to be moved around, and in context, a typical haulage truck takes about 8 cube, so that's over 40,000 vehicle movements in haulage alone. There's a strong ecology bent to this as well. We've been very conscientious in respecting the countryside, and we've been relocating new bat, owl boxes, general bird ecology. And at the end of the job, we will be planting over 12,000 new trees and shrubs, so it will be seamless at the end of the day. And I'd note at this point, the existing A59 gets turned back to moorland, so you'll never know it was ever there. Again, it's moving the whole highway to the northern side of the valley, where the ground conditions are far more stable. And I believe there were 14 iterations of the design alignment before choosing the optimum solution, working on the geological information, the ground conditions, the rock bed, etc., to ensure that it's 100% stable when that new highway is built. So you can see on the bottom picture, everything does get moved over to the north. It loops up from the Fewston Reservoir on quite a curving trajectory on a dual lane, so there'll be a climbing lane, so you will be able to overtake the slow moving vehicles. At the moment, if you get stuck behind one on a single carriageway, that's it till the top. But this actually has a climbing lane until you reach the plateau, so you'll be able to have that overtaking opportunity. It then goes into the normal just two-way flow once on the top of the hill. As you can see, the coloured areas, the light blue and the red, that is the cut and fill. Now, essentially, the job is a cut and fill excavation scheme where we're cutting out the peaks and filling in the hollows to create the smooth linear trajectory of the whole alignment. The complexity, of course, is as you drop down the valley toward the Blubberhouse's end, where it's very, very steep. So that's a very complex set of engineering to overcome, and there'll be some very steep sided bankings at that point as well. The plan shows the various structures varying from what will be quite lengthy visible retaining walls at the side of the highway through to underpasses for the bridleways, culverts, etc. And I've got some pictures to show you them later. So that's the job in essence. As I say, quite a challenge. Not helped by the fact that it's all microclimate on the top of the moor there. It can be bright sunshine in the bottom, but at the top it'll be horizontal wind and rain. But we've done okay with the weather. We've actually been fairly lucky. We haven't lost many days. So in terms of progress, we've made substantive progress on the ground to the point whereby the full length of the new highway has been stripped back across the moorland. We've done essentially most of the subgrade works, everything below ground in essence. We've done a lot of the cut and fill operations, so that's ongoing. So there's dozens of machinery up on the top there working away on that earthworks. That is now coming to an end as the season curtails, and we'll be picking it up again in earnest next March. to start the new earthworks season, and that next season will focus very much on the above ground components to the job. So at the moment we're focusing on the various structures. That's work that are not weather dependent. A lot of it's precast units which we bring and crane in and bed in, etc. So that's fine. We're now focusing upon the drainage work. So the huge network of drainage pipes will be ongoing over the winter period. Again, it's not particularly weather dependent. As I say, we've had to create a temporary haul road 4 kilometres length in itself at 6 metres wide, made out of crushed stone. So that will be removed upon completion, but that was a job in itself initially. The dry stone walling work is essentially complete. A lot of the new bridleways have been formed, and I've got a picture to show you that later. We've had to divert the beck in the valley bottom. That work essentially is done. We've done some piling, concrete piles into the ground to support some of the new bankings that are coming along. Band drains is a technique whereby we drill vertically into the ground and install material which absorbs the surrounding water table again to stabilise it. That work's complete as well. So moving on, a few pictures to digest. So this is the dry stone walling that I'm talking about. I say the guys who've done this are absolutely top of the game. You wouldn't know that was a brand new wall. It's recycled all the original walling material. We've very neatly taken down the existing walls, catalogued the respective stones, and they've been built pretty much as they were, but just in a different location. It's a very high quality work indeed. So we've scoured the land, and indeed from Ireland, experts in dry stone walling. So we've kind of absorbed that skill set from out the wider UK. But it's pretty much finished. You're welcome to go up any time. I can arrange a site visit if you'd like to see that. But it's all very traditional, and it looks absolutely fantastic. The photo on the top right hand side is the new bridleway. That's the diverted bridleway. So in its raw state, of course, you can see the big boulders that we've been taking out, that we come across them all the time. But that will be the new bridleway running parallel to the new highway, which is quite interesting. Structures. So yes, the various structures. These are quite substantive, ranging from dealing with water courses. The one on the top left-hand side is taking the beck diversion. That's been built in essence. You'll see the ledge is through there for animals, otters, etc., to still gain access through. So that's being designed in. The beck has been designed again to a very high quality water course with a natural sort of flow profile in there. So again, that's all to the fore. The piling operation in the bottom left, with some pretty big machinery up there dropping piles in. That's for the big retaining wall at structure 2, just behind the bund where the site compound is at the top of the valley there. Again, all this is visible actually from the roadside as you drive past. It's one of the most visible aspects of what we're doing. So you can see that's structure 10, and that's where a haul lane will actually go over the top of there, the diverted haul lane, which runs parallel to the new road. So that's haul beck will go through there as well. That's the diversion of the water course. So all that work is very, very advanced in one sense. Again, the work in that valley bottom has been quite difficult. We've found a lot of unsuitable waterlogged ground. It was a floodplain, of course, so we've had to take out quite a lot of that material and bed these structures on new imported stone fill, which has been quite costly. And indeed, I would note at this point it's an extra as well to the job. So general earthworks, this again some massive plant and machinery up there working away on the respective profiling that we have to do. I love this photo on the bottom left-hand corner there. That's actually this sort of a circular moonscape is the new outfall pond for the drainage. So I think that's really interesting indeed, and that's been carefully shaped with the machinery. So that will be a new wetland habitat indeed at the end of the job as well. So it has a win-win for us. It's the outfall for our drainage network, but we're also creating new habitat as well. But you know, as you can see, it's all very, very neatly profiled. Again, just some more general shots of the generic works that are going on. We have the big D6 dozers grading away the material, the big back actors, site dumpers everywhere. A good shot at the bottom there of the benching. So this is towards the bottom of the valley. Again, you can obviously see this from the roadside, but creating the platform for the new highway, we have to bench into a series of ledges into the terrain and also create them from scratch as well. And they are formed partly by recycling the material that we've excavated from the works, and ensuring that there is a suitable constituency of material to have that stability to stand up on a vertical face, and also partly by importing new fill material. But between the both techniques, they will go off rock hard, and there'll be a 100% permanent base for the new highway. So part of the programme for the works actually allows the settlement of these earthwork bankings as well. So when you put them in, there's a certain tolerance that's been designed in for the earth to settle to an optimum position by a few millimetres, centimetres, for instance, before we can build off them. But that settlement period is quite extensive. You know, you're looking at several months for it to settle. So that's built into the programme. So you'll see activity, and then you might think there's nothing going on, but it's because it's built in for the ground to stabilise in essence once we've worked on it. Just a slide here really on the reasoning, well, the core reasoning for doing the job in the first place. It's all based upon the instability of the land up there, and this was the unfortunate incident we had back early in the year, whereby the highway was simply, the subbase were washed out, the side banking totally collapsed, and the existing highway was cantilevered over the blacktop there. And what actually happened is, I think this time, because it was perpetual water streams running under the substrata, continually washing away the subgrade, what you found was the actual bitumen split away, and you could drop your tape down there. There was a cavern up to about 1 metre deep. The tape was waggling about in these gaps. It wasn't just the undercut, it was actually in this area here as well, where there were caves forming under the road, which was quite staggering really. So we addressed that. We spent £2 million putting in a sheet pile retaining wall to remediate all that. But the reason it all took as long as it did, it took several weeks, and it wasn't open until just before the Great Yorkshire Show, which was the timeline we gave them, and we met that indeed, was that unfortunately this slippage occurred at the tie-in point where our new road essentially ties in, and certainly where the big new bankings are going. So the temporary works weren't temporary, they had to future-proof against our future works pending, which will be forthcoming in the new year. So that took a degree of design process to understand that, and so it wasn't essentially £2 million lost for an 18-month gain. It absolutely does future-proof what we're doing anyway, and it heads off any sort of claims from the contractor that is building off an unstable platform. So just a little bit of a background there. As I say, it's the 14th landslide in 2 decades, and we all know the chaos it caused when the road isn't there. Massive diversions, around the Dales and into the neighbouring authorities, Otley Ilkley, not popular at all by anybody. So hooks
Richard, I'm minded there's only sort of like about 5 minutes left for this item, and I've got quite a few questions. So
Right.
If you can just wrap up really quickly, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay, I've nearly finished. There's only a couple more slides anyway. So yeah, comms, we're doing podcasts. We're on BBC Look North, quite a good slot there. I don't know if you ever saw that. There's a lot of social value going on by the contractor. A lot of good causes being supported. Programme-wise, we are on track to open the new highway in, we think now, June 26. That's the new road opening date, and all the seasonal constraints, the ecology constraints are being worked out to ensure that happens. There'll be some, at the moment you'll see there's some temporary traffic lights to facilitate the tie-in works down at the Church Lane. That will be coming off in the January period. They will be going back on again towards the back end of next year. The road will still be open, but there'll be lights, that's all. So yeah, okay, well, thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Question from the chair. But first one is, will this road, the new road, ever slip again, and will it ever be closed again? And the second question is there any plans to have to close the existing A59 as we move towards linking it in? And do we know when that will be yet, if that is the case?
Well, to answer your first question, no. As an engineer, it should not slip again. It's been designed to be slip-proof, shall we say. That's the reason for doing it. So, yeah, I can assure you on that one, unless something we don't know is going to happen. But no, it's designed to be future-proofed, in essence. And secondly, we will never close the road entirely unless there's a further slip. But at the tie-in points, we will be operating on temporary traffic lights. As noted in the slide earlier, there was the works at Churchill are on a shuttle working system. They will go through to the end of January to facilitate some of the tie-in works at the Churchill, the Hall Lane end. And it's not until late 25 where we start doing the tie-in works at North Moor Road at the top of the hill there. Again, it'll be working on temporary signals, not a full closure.
Excellent. Councillor Hall, Councillor Staveley and Councillor Murder.
Thank you, Richard, for your presentation, and thank you to everyone that's working on this project. Just quickly, you said there wouldn't be any full lane closures, but in the programme summary chart, it says that there may be some full road closures, presumably in and around the tie-in of the roads at the end. Whilst I appreciate you've had a lot of challenges, there have been some delays, and so the opening of the new road has been put back. If there will be full lane closures, at what stage can you advise local residents and businesses in advance of those, particularly people that live in and around Asquith and also Pateley Bridge? Because I think they're the two villages, village and town, that have taken the brunt of the road closures in the past. And it's really important, particularly for local businesses, that they know about these well in advance, because some of them are dependent on passing traffic. So they need to schedule possibly employees' holidays around these things. And also, if you own a hospitality business, you might need to schedule what kind of food supplies and things you will order in advance, because you don't want those going to waste. So really, it was just that. How much notice and how will you give notice to local residents and businesses about any potential full road closures, please?
Yes, absolutely. I fully appreciate that. We would give at least 6 weeks notice on any road closures. That would need a temporary traffic regulation order to enact that. So, between 6 and 8 weeks, it would be the norm. The only potential planned road closure will be the final bituminous surfacing. That would literally be just a day or so. It wouldn't be a prolonged period at all. And again, we would try and, if we have to, we'll work out of hours to do that as well. So yes, there may be, I say no road closures at the very back end of the works when we had to do the final servicing. We'd probably do, in fairness, have to close it for a couple of days or so, but certainly nothing substantive.
Staveley?
Yeah, thank you. You talked about redirecting various infrastructure services. Was there any consideration given to the idea of actually not putting those under the road, but at the side of the road? So when you do need to access them, you don't close the road and dig up that nice new surface that you're waiting to lay down. Second thing, I'm a little bit surprised that we've had to rob the Emerald Isle of their dry stone wallers when we're actually at the probably one of the hotbeds of dry stone walling, and the most prolifically dry stone walled landscapes in England, with a support network that goes with it. I'm pretty sure we would have been able to find them without dragging them over the water. But anyway, that was a bit of a surprise. And thirdly, where are the police camera vans going to go? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, dry stone walling was a combined effort. There's a lot of local resource being supplied. I think there was certainly, because CISC, the contractor, is an Irish firm, in fairness, they supplemented some of their experts as well. So it was a combined effort in that sense. It wasn't all imported labour, I can assure you on that one. Yeah. Sorry, what did you say again? I've lost my train of thought.
About putting the infrastructure under the at the side of the road rather
Yes.
than directly under it. Has there been any consideration given to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, it's happening. Yes, a lot of the ducting is certainly the utility ducting is going in the verges at the side of the road. The only infrastructure under the permanent carriageway will be the drainage runs, which again, the main carrier drains would have to be under the road. But yeah, all the utilities essentially are in the verge, as they are indeed now. Everything runs up the verge now. The BT, some quite, key fibre optic links are in the verge, just inducting the verge, and that will continue. So, yeah,
Oh, thanks, Jan. Thanks, Richard. I wanted to ask about oversight. Actually, the huge project with vast expense and undoubtedly expected to be some degree of overspend. My question is, how is NYC overseeing the project from the contractors in terms of finance? What supervision is there from NYC engineers and highways regarding how the project is progressing, particularly with regard to any financial implications for overrun?
Yes, we have. Obviously, we have internal expertise within the major projects team, but we also predominantly rely upon outsourced NEC, which is the contractual type supervisory team. There's a significant team on the ground working for us on that NEC contract. They're overseeing all the contract administration, the measure, the compensation events, which is additional extras, etc. We've also got outreach to industry expertise in terms of that absolute specialism on claims, for instance. We've got a top team overseeing this between the various resources we have to hand, so we don't have any concerns in that respect. I think the challenge really is, working with the contractor and reaching a fair and equitable settlement at the end of the day. That there has been a few claims, so yeah, it is whilst the work's progressing very well on the ground, the negotiation table has its own challenges as well, and you're quite right to ask that. But I can assure you that we're able to match that expertise across the table in kind, and we are doing.
Councillor Conliffe, Lister.
Thank you. I've got a question about the bridle path you mentioned. You mentioned it running parallel with the road, and I just can't see where that is on the presentation you've given. So I'm just interested to see where that runs and the extent to which it runs, because at the same time, I'm wondering what's going to happen to the old road. Is it going to be closed? Is it going to remain adopted? Is there any potential for it to be? Is it there? Oh, sorry, so that's been answered. You're taking it up, are you? Because I'm wondering whether or not it could be a nice route for a cycle path or a footpath.
Well,
Could be a footpath. No.
The bridleway, yes, it's a combination. There's several bridleways. It's not just a single bridleway. The meander, around that northern face of the valley. So yes, they run parallel at one point. At one point, it absolutely goes underneath the road and works its way around. So I could send you a plan with a wider network if you're happy to do it. You'll receive that. In terms of the old A59, yes, I agree. It would have been a fantastic opportunity to convert that to an active mode route. Unfortunately, because of its instability, it would have been a liability to the Highway Authority maintaining that walking and cycling routes. Their decision was taken to actually close it rather than have the dangerous potential of even the bridleway, if it was a bridleway, being collapsing and worst comes to the worst, a landslide when you're actually there. The old road is actually being opened in the valley, maintained open in the valley bottom through to I think there's a gamekeeper's lodge before it starts climbing up. So it'll be converted to a single carriageway up to that point to allow local access, but from there it will be fully closed. Not only closed, it will be topsoiled, and it will be returfed with a natural moorland habitat there, so you'll never know it's there. There'll be no path left anymore.
Councillor Ayton.
Thank you. You said about where the road will be linking into the old A59. The £2 million that was spent on the landslip there. You said that would be money that would have had to been spent. But had it been identified before this project started, or is it unexpected expenditure?
It was actually over. We didn't know that the land was going to slip at that juncture. So the expenditure really has occurred in having to reinforce the substrata in that point. Pending the new earth banking, 8-metre earth banking, which will sit at that point to support the new road. So it was actually over. Yes, it wasn't planned. I think the point I was trying to make is that the £2 million which was expended to open the road again won't be just for the 18-month period whilst the old road is in operation. That money is, given it's an extra and accepting it's an extra, would actually support the new road as well.
Councillor Hall, briefly.
Sorry, just very briefly. I was driving up Keckskill last week, and I noticed that there was some work going on to clear what appeared to be rocks that had fallen across the road. Was that presumably not a temporary? So that was just a slip of rocks that had fallen down onto the road. It wasn't the road slipping itself. Do you know anything about that?
I'm sorry, I don't know about that. I'll have to make inquiries about that. It's not reached my ears as an incident, so I can find out though. I'm assuming it was just a miscellaneous small fall. It certainly wasn't reportable to myself as head of service. But I will find out. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think that's the issue, isn't it? That despite all the upset that the realignment of Keckskill has caused, the various issues, it really does need doing, because those landslips will continue, and the money it costs us to maintain that bank in that order, so it doesn't all fall onto the road, is a huge expense on a yearly basis as well. So thank you very much, Richard, for your presentation, and for your update, and please get it done by June 2026.
No, we're certainly putting our best endeavours into that at the moment. That is the programme. The contract's not telling us anything else, so no, I will keep you updated, obviously. So no, it's been a pleasure. If you would like to make a visit to site, you're more than welcome. I can arrange that. We have the 4x4s on site. We can take you to the working fronts if you'd like to have a closer depth review of everything that's going on up there. It's fascinating, just generally. So yeah, that's an open offer. So by all means, just get in touch. So thank you. Right.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Julia Stack. I'm one of the community safety and CCTV managers for North Yorkshire. I have a colleague that covers the same area, Paul Rowlands, who covers sort of principally the Scarborough sort of patch and out to Rydale. So what we wanted to do today was just give you a little bit of an overview in terms of what's happening in the community safety and CCTV world. So as a service, we reorganised in May this year, so bringing sort of teams in across the whole of North Yorkshire. So I think the key thing to sort of note is that the community safety hubs that you've probably known over the years are still in place. So you've still got your one base here in Skipton, and then the Ripon patch is covered by the Harrogate and the Harrogate office as well. So what we have introduced is 3 senior community safety officers sort of covering the areas. So you'll see within the report there that Edie Griffiths will cover the Harrogate, Skipton and Selby, so a big patch to cover. But I'm sure many of you for Skipton area know Stacey Ripon well, and Stacey's still here. So that's sort of good news in terms of that sort of thing. So we are working across the piece in terms of the community safety hubs and what their roles are and the relationship with North and staffing provided by North Yorkshire Police. And so that's work in progress at the moment in terms of supporting all of that type of stuff. So what we've tried to do is just give you a little bit of a snapshot in terms of some of the activities that are actually taking place, with a plan to sort of think about how we're going to present stuff moving forward. So one of the big projects that's happening across North Yorkshire is the introduction of some knife bins. So this is a scheme that we was fortunate enough to secure money from what was the PCC's office, prior to the Mayor's office coming in place. And it was an intelligence-led exercise in terms of identifying where those knife bins are going. We ran a pilot project in Harrogate, and to date it's probably been in there about 18 months, and we've had about 1,600 knives deposited into the knife bin. So you can see from the report that we've got 3 locations new. So there's the one at the fire station in Skipton Coach Park, and then there'll be one at the Sainsbury's car park in Ripon as well. So just a couple of other little sort of projects that are probably fairly pertinent here. Stacey's been very active in terms of developing projects around antisocial behaviour and commissioning some additional youth provision. And we're sort of looking at how we can sustain that moving forward. And there's been a couple of key projects in Ripon, which was the Temple Gardens project, where we had particular ASB, and we're working with partners on that. And then the Greaves Court, Ripon again, where we've sort of secured that location. The Greaves Court one in particular, working really closely with Ripon Bid, and that was particularly successful. I have to say there's a good working relationship with the team there in terms of sort of accessing funding and sort of working in partnership. Just also wanted to touch on, so there's the community safety hub side of the structure, and then there's also the community safety partnership side. So that's where it's probably the more policy driven side, and that links into the county-wide statutory community safety partnership. So that's additional work there, and you'll see from your packs there's various themes that underpin that work. In terms of CCTV, so particularly, so what we've actually got, we've got CCTV control rooms. Just a bit of context, there's one in Harrogate, there's one in Knaresborough, and there's one in Northallerton, and then we outsource the provision in Selby. So there is an extensive piece of work going on at the moment in terms of CCTV, because I'm sure members are aware that the building at Northallerton is closing and shutting down, so we have to relocate the control room there, and we haven't quite decided yet where that will go, but that's a huge piece of work. That doesn't affect the cameras at Ripon, and they still remain coming into the control room at Harrogate, and all of those cameras fully operational. The service continues to be 24/7, 365 days a year. Sometimes we do have some staffing challenges. It's a very small team and trying to run a 24-hour service. But I think, moving forward, it's about looking at what opportunities there may be alongside our partners in terms of the development of CCTV. And as you're probably aware, technology moves all the time. I think one of the key things is sometimes with the CCTV service, we're not continuing to move in terms of some of that development work. That's the sort of the strategy side of things. So gives you a bit of a brief overview of where we are. The plan is I'm going to be attending the chairs and vice chairs meeting of the area committees in January. We are looking to try and have a consistent approach in terms of what we present to you as area committee members across the whole piece. So I've been talking to police colleagues because one of the things that we know that you do like is that there's police representation at the meetings and for us to give it a real flavour of local information. And so we're just working on the frequency of when we will come and what we will actually bring, so that, and then we'll agree that with the chairs and vice chairs, so you get more information about your local crime figures. You'll be able to talk to your senior police officers, and then link that into the sort of the work of the community safety hubs and that local delivery side of things. Chair.
Thank you. Succinct, thanks. Just on a sort of like a point rather than anything else. So CCTV in Craven never really took off. As a small local authority, it was always deemed it was an expensive thing that we couldn't really afford to do. People have it on the shops, people have it on the businesses. This is that opportunity to use what is being produced by other people, and actually having that linked up hub for on a night. Just it was beyond us to really justify, and plus it's also difficult because putting Skipton town centre, then what happens with Settle, what happens with Bentham, what happens with Ingleton, Grassington, Cross Hills. It was just how do we manage this to deliver it? So good luck with that as you try to roll it out across North Yorkshire. We'll take anything we're given as part of the bigger wider county. I suppose it would be something I would say, but the reality is that there is a lot of that going on that, you know, private individuals have. The doorbell cams seem to be a great source of information now for the police moving forward. I'm going to come to Councillor Staveley because he sort of did the crime and disorder at Craven first, but I'm looking for other members to comment as well. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just wondering what the rationale was for the knife bins, because I wasn't aware that North Yorkshire was a hotbed of knife crime. It's not, it's not the borough of Westminster. And, the biggest issues that we tend to have, certainly in this part of the world, is more centred around rural crimes, wildlife crimes, theft from of agricultural equipment and stock, that sort of thing. So, 1,600 knives in Harrogate. Were they butter knives? I don't know. I just can't imagine the people who wish to use these knives in anger particularly give them up freely, but I may stand corrected.
Yeah, I think that it's sort of sometimes it's misleading in terms of thinking, oh, actually, it's all sort of criminal side of things with the knife bin. So the intelligence led was really around looking at the violence statistics. But what we wanted to try and do is have a footprint across the whole of North Yorkshire as best we could. When we've actually done an assessment of a lot of the knives that have come into the bin at Asda's in Harrogate, they're predominantly kitchen knives. What we're trying to do is, we've had an education programme there, is about encouraging the safe disposal of people. You often have, I know it when I've had elderly relatives die, you end up with like loads of knives in a drawer. What do you do with those? So the campaign's been really around, putting them somewhere safe, wrapping them in the knife bin, rather than have, yes, we've had some quite serious knives being put in there, and we would send those off for analysis if we thought we needed to. But really it's about that safe disposal. We are seeing increases of young people carrying knives, and that is across the footprint, across the whole of North Yorkshire. So there's quite a lot of activity and working with youth groups in terms of that education around the impact of knives, knife carrying. So it's an education and a sort of a, yes, we haven't got lots of stabbings, and we've had some unfortunate incidents, and certainly across the county. But, certainly when you compare us to the big cities, no, it's not the same sort of problem. However, what we're trying to do is educate people about that safe disposal. And often it's a conversation that parents are having, because they're finding their children carrying knives or they're finding in the bedrooms. We're just trying to encourage you to just safely dispose of them.
Yeah, street bins and quad bike bins are probably a bit far away, but if we stop one knife crime, it's important, isn't it?
Because obviously we had Rural Watch networks set up. Are you continuing to support those? Because we found that they're very effective in this area. Could sometimes not be, just depending on how well run they were. But I know in Council Foster's patch is a very effective group, and others are throughout the area.
Dominantly police led, but yes, and they've still got their rural task force and everything else like that. So yes, I would have thought that they would be critical to some of the more rural areas, and that might be something that we want to make sure that we bring back to this group in terms of the effectiveness of those types of networks.
Councillor Solomon.
The point about bringing information back. Yesterday, I myself and Councillor Noland attended a community safety meeting, which is led by Skipton Town Council. And they seem to be leading on it. What I'm trying to avoid is duplication, because that meeting was well attended. It was a very productive meeting, but there I was sat next to a serving police officer doing a report. I'm not sure I want them to come and present the same information to us. I'd much rather than be out on the beat. The same with other people who are doing community safety. I want them to be doing their roles, not presenting stuff to multiple meetings. So my point is, the Craven District Council used to have a crime and disorder function, which was reported on a 6-monthly basis. And I'm just trying to avoid the duplication. So it needs to be a decision whether it comes to area committees or whether it's a local level. Because, I mean, Councillor Staveley raised the thing of rural crime. That wasn't even mentioned at the meeting yesterday because it was Skipton based. So we wouldn't be dealing with that. But I think that does need dealing with and being reported back as a general rule, because that's another aspect of crime around here.
That's absolutely fine. You know, we'll take that on board. What we don't want to do is duplicate. We want to bring stuff that's meaningful to you and sort of influence our decision making. So no, that's absolutely, we can take that back.
Councillor Lister.
Thank you. I'm just interested in how the CCTV control rooms operate. I mean, is that just a resource that you go back to if some criminal or antisocial behaviour is reported, or is that actively monitored where you're looking for the behaviour to then take action on? And I got a second question, which is what's recorded, can that be shared between departments within the council? If perhaps the regeneration unit wanted to understand behaviour, footfall on the high street, or when cars were being parked in certain areas or not, is that a resource that can be shared? Thank you.
I'll take the first one. So yes, within the control rooms, it's proactive surveillance. So there's teams of, admittedly, the Northallerton control room is not 24/7, but the Scarborough and Harrogate ones are. So you've got a team of staff who are doing proactive surveillance. They're monitoring, they make the towns. They're very, very skilled in terms of their operating. So the control rooms also have police airwaves in them. So that means that we are listening live to what is going on. So we're preempting that we might need to be looking at something. So that's a key thing. And certainly within the Harrogate control room, we have something called Channel 50. So if anybody watches any of the police sort of road traffic programmes, often you can hear the CCTV control room. We're linked into that. And the huge benefit of that is it's very real time. So if you imagine a call comes into the force control room, sometimes that might take a number of minutes before it could filter through to the CCTV control room. So Channel 50 from a traffic point of view is absolutely immediate. I can assure you that the staff are very proactive. They're very good in terms of reading body language and so on. So if any evidence is actually required, so that's stored for 30 days. Principally our main customer is North Yorkshire Police. So in terms of providing evidence for that, but then we'll also provide evidence for third party, if it's usually a road traffic accident, through an insurance company. The second question in terms of sharing with other departments, the CCTV Public Open Space Network is registered with the ICO to say that it's principally for the prevention and detection of crime. So we have to be very clear about what we are using the cameras for. It's not saying that we won't be obstructive, but it's there for a principal purpose. And in terms of the type of surveillance that you're doing. So yes, we would be helpful in terms of sort of trying to understand traffic flow or different things like that, but we have to be careful in terms of its use. Harrogate control room, we also have a little sub control room at Boroughbridge for the highways team, and so they have access to about 36 cameras that are principally on the highway, and so they use those cameras at particular time for sort of their traffic monitoring and particular things like that. And we would always have ultimate control. So if there was an incident happening from a crime or a community safety point of view, we would override the highway staff using those. But there is that element of it. But we try and cooperate as best.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Good morning, Julia. I was going to mention Boroughbridge, which isn't in the report, because Boroughbridge has had a number of incidents recently in antisocial behaviour, and I presume you're monitoring that. Hmm.
Of particular incidents, and that's where the team will work closely with the resources locally in terms of tackling those from a problem solving point of view.
Just for the information, are Boroughbridge Town Council monitoring their cameras?
I don't deal with those. And they will be, if something has happened, a request would go into the town council for somebody to do a retrospective review of something that has actually taken place.
And my second thing was hate crime, which you've got in here. With what's been happening nationally with hate crime, has there been a scaling back on hate crime intentions, really to take into account the fact that some hate crimes that have been reported have taken police away from tackling what they should be doing, that's burglaries and all the other things?
That's very much a police question in terms of their use of their resources, which obviously we can bring back at a future meeting. But certainly in terms of thematic work from a community safety point of view, hate crime is a priority, and there's a lot of work taking place from a strategic point of view, and there's a number of working groups in terms of developing work and supporting communities around hate crime.
I hope they're taking into account what has been happening nationally.
Absolutely, yeah, they're very aware of what's
Priorities, you know. Thank you very much, Julia.
I just very briefly want to thank Julia for the, as a director of Ripon Bid, for the very positive and constructive working relationship that does exist between the bid and her team. Very grateful for the positive outcomes that we're delivering as a consequence. I think all too often our officers come to these meetings and face a barrage of questions and often criticism. Why aren't we doing this, that, or the other? So I am very grateful, and the rest of the bid board are very grateful for the partnership working which has been undertaken.
Just on that, I mean, we had very good working relations with Stacey over the years at Craven as well. It's worked fantastically well. I'm mindful that me and Andy are going on behalf of this committee to discuss how this is delivered, and I do think it ought to be delivered at this forum or crime and disorder, that 6 monthly basis, because I do think it gives out the opportunity, whilst Skipton Council are doing what they want to do, and that's absolutely fine. I do think it gives the wider population the opportunity to come here, especially if there are issues in their area, and make them known both towards that and to the safety partnership. So I do think that'd be my opinion going forward into those meetings, that we do have that access through this conduit, because the rural areas aren't covered by that. Skipton Ripon isn't covered by that. Boroughbridge isn't covered by that. Pateley Bridge isn't covered by that. So therefore, that doesn't stop those organisations having those contacts, which they do, and rightly so. But it just means that there is that specific forum where people know they can come to within the area, and that is a crime and disorder of a fashion, however, whatever we call it. But my only other comment is really on Prevent, and is that still ongoing, and is that still very active within this area?
It's a picture for North Yorkshire in terms of what are the issues from a sort of a bottom-up point of view, in terms of shaping that. We've had our first meetings of the various local Prevent partnership meetings. So that's just sort of early stages in terms of probably rejuvenating it, to be quite honest. But I know that I know Stacey a lot of years. She's got a lot of local knowledge, and she's been key in terms of probably I'd honestly say her passion around Prevent. So that's a real advantage for us here in the Skipton area. But yeah, it's very much a priority at the moment.
Thank you, and thank you for coming, and we'll let you go and move on to the next item, which is the petition. So we'll start off, Gareth Adams, if you want to come and do your piece of public participation, that'd be great.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. I'm Gareth Adams, Chairman of Bentham Town Council. It's interesting to hear that we've already had speed mentioned twice this morning. Worried about cyclists on the canal path and also where we're going to put the speed camera van on the new Catskill Road. During my time on Bentham Town Council, we have continually tried to improve road safety within the Bentham parish, particularly in respect of that of pedestrians. We have been disappointed on a number of occasions, but we've had some successes. Requests for speed enforcement for problem areas, partaking in schemes for vehicle activated signs, changing of parking arrangements, roads narrowed on the B6480 at Mount Pleasant, unfortunately though, after a member of the public was hit by a vehicle, and some works to provide safe routes to school when the new school was built. Most of these have been hard to achieve, financial restrictions, practicalities on the ground and policy and protocol all playing their part. Bizarrely, it would seem we need injuries and worse to back up requests rather than gut feeling chat and near misses, some being significant. When the new school was built, for example, countless meetings between the town council, highways engineers, education department, town planners all took place, ultimately leading to the town council accepting the current arrangement, which was best achieved at the time, but we knew would be questioned in years to come. The council received notice of a petition on the agenda today from residents of Bentham. It's also received a significant number of letters from our primary school pupils detailing their concerns about speeding outside the school. Our local Bentham news is regularly full of topic. In response to these, we commissioned 5 sites to be surveyed. These were chosen by council with a view to being suitable for 20-mile-an-hour speed limits to be implemented, the criteria being that of a mean speed of 24 miles per hour or less. These were duly surveyed and results presented in your paper. I have changed the report that we received to Town Council was a draft report which recommended that 4 out of 5 were not suited, whereas the report that you have in front of you today recommends that potentially 4 out of 5 are suited. So there is a little bit of what's happened in the last week around that. North Yorkshire seems to be a bit of an outlier in response to road safety, whether it be that of 20-mile-an-hour zones, improved pedestrian safety, or even enforcement. As we move towards nippy, practically silent electric vehicles, an increasingly vulnerable population of increasing numbers, we need policy and improvements to reflect that, and not those of infrequent clattery steady away Austin 7s and Model T Fords. Bentham Town Council has put away a small amount of money in its precept for next year, hopefully to use for such items such as vehicle activated signs, or if we need to conduct more surveys of other areas. But we really need you to look to endorsing this petition and working outward and not inward with where we drill the holes to put the post for the 20-mile-an-hour roundels. Thank you.
Thank you. We've obviously Darren Griffiths on stream from North Yorkshire and Kevin Watts here to present the petition. I would just say we've got the usual options with the petition. It has made over the 500 signatures, so that's why it's here. And if we look at the report now is that the committee recommends that officers proceed to consultation on the introduction of a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit as set out in the report. So that's what we're looking at. But we'll go over to Kevin now, if that's all right, Kevin, to present the petition.
Thank you.
You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks. My name's Kevin Ward, my wife Edna here from Bentham. We've been collecting the signatures. We are pleased that the officers have recommended 20-mile-an-hour speed limits on main streets in High and Low Bentham, and Cuddenburgh Road as well, I think, but many streets have been left out. In particular, Station Road with its narrow pavements, the Burton Road with no pavements at all in some places, Robin Lane with its 80 residential care facilities, and most of all, number 4 outside the primary school. In gathering signatures, we knocked on every door in High and Low Bentham, which has a population of 3,000. Half of the people were usually out, but of the first 258 people we asked, 93.8% wanted a reduction in the speed limit. So with some With over 1,000 signatures collected, you would be supported by the public. This is democracy at work. For the last 45 years, I've walked to work along Main Street, then Station Road with its narrow pavements down one side. It is necessary to step onto the road to avoid each other. I do this every day in life. School children in dark uniforms walk down this road in the dark. 20 years ago, a teenager, Daniel Zola, was knocked down on this road, suffering severe brain injuries. I knew him personally. The car was travelling at 30 miles an hour. 30 years ago, our daughter failed her driving test. She was travelling at 30 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, but it was deemed to be unsafe because of the number of pedestrians out and about. I personally find it unnerving to have tons of steel flying past within 2 or 3 feet. This is when I'm going down Station Road to work every day, 3-foot pavement, the cars are there. It's not pleasant. Before we gave a talk at the so how does it then feel for a small child? Before we give a talk at the school, most children, when asked what they did not like about Bentham, this is a survey before we did it, Ed and me went to give a talk there, said unprompted, one of the main concerns was the speed of cars. In particular, the parents who signed a petition want to make the road from the school to the centre of Bentham, a distance of 400 yards, safer for walking home. Traffic would, in theory, have to take an extra 14 seconds. What should be a time of communication with the children before home becomes an anxious, unpleasant 8-minute walk. I do this once a week with a 7-year-old. Very hard to talk to him with a tyre noise. So the school must have priority in any scheme. On a national level, there have been some resounding successes. From Wales, we now have concrete evidence from the first 9 months of their scheme. Number one, people killed down 35%, serious injuries down 14.2%, and a saving of 45.5 million on the National Health Service. Close to home in Calderdale, North Yorkshire's own data shows within a 3-year period, there has been a 30% casualty reduction and a public saving of 3 million, a rate of return of £3.65 for every pound spent on the scheme. Also public support of 80%. So in the light of all this, we would like to present the council with a detailed map which includes these roads in Bentham, yet is still far smaller than our original scheme, which was a sort of a blanket default system. Therefore, we ask that this matter be postponed until the next area meeting. To conclude, there are 360 pedestrian deaths per year in the United Kingdom and over 5,000 life-changing injuries. Can anyone here think of any disadvantages of driving more slowly? So please, councillors, can you do your best? Thank you.
Is there anything you would like to add at the moment, Darren, from the North Yorkshire, or do you want to hear members' debate?
Yes, good morning. Yes, good morning. I've only been involved in this the last week or so. The draft response was written by my colleagues in Area 5, who unfortunately can't make it today, so I've stepped in. But I am heavily involved in speed limits, and especially 20-mile-an-hour speed limits across the county. So I'm happy to come along today and try and help you where I can. I was involved in the final response, not the draft response. So since I've been involved, we have agreed to certainly look at 20-mile-an-hour speed limits on the main street. The school is still up for debate. Yes, we are very flexible around schools and we will reduce speed limits always where we can. But we've got to bear in mind the existing speeds, the width of the road, where the survey was undertaken, the speeds outside school times have to be undertaken. So that needs further investigation outside the school. It's not ruled out, but it's certainly, as it stands, we can't agree to it yet, but it needs further investigation. Robin Lane is probably the only one that we we couldn't agree to. The speeds are very high, especially southbound coming down the hill. To get those speeds down to 20 mile an hour, we need physical traffic calming measures outside people's houses, and that is likely to be very unpopular.
Thank you. Councillor Ayrton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I welcome the petition that's been presented us this morning for the 20 mile an hour speed limits. The actual site that I'm working with planning officers and highway officers is the one opposite Bentham School. I know the speeds just drop into the test for our policy, but that is, in my view, essential that we get a 20 mile an hour speed limit introduced opposite the school. We must keep these walk routes to schools as safe as we can. So therefore, I will be continuing to press for that, Darren, on the Low Bentham School. I have spoke with the planning officers. As you'll be aware, there's a planning application coming up next to the school for houses, and within that, there is an opportunity, I think, to get a 20 mile an hour introduced in that area. But the planning officer tells me that he's waiting for a response from North Yorkshire Council Area Committee in response for that request. So perhaps you could look into that one. I do recognise that speed limits are only as good as the drivers. And unfortunately, we see many drivers that exceed them and take absolutely no notice whatsoever of them. And that's why we see the police mobile vans out regularly. This morning when I left Ingleton, it was on the A65 monitoring speed. If the speed limits actually worked, there'd be no need for those. But we must do what we can to help the safety both of pedestrians and drivers. So I welcome the petition, and I would move the recommendation that officers proceed to consultation to the introduction of 20 mile an hour speed limits set out in the report. Well, not set out in the report, including opposite the school. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the report.
Thank you. Just remember, we've only had 15 minutes on this. We've plenty of time left yet, but that's how long we get to debate petition of Councillor Myers. Sorry, Councillor Staveley.
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with Bentham. Anecdotally, I mean, it gets blocked up regularly. The traffic parked at either side of the road. You quite often on the main street have to wait for traffic coming on, oncoming traffic to get out of the way before you can get past. And I think the one of these 5 sites that are listed, the one that I really would strongly agree with the 20 mile an hour limit is actually the one outside the school, which is being said to be requires further investigation. That one seems to me not to really require any investigation. It would be a sensible solution. As for the others, I'm sorry, but statistically, it just isn't there. The speeds that are being done, there's exceptions clearly, but on the average speeds aren't as excessive given the current speed limit. And when you look at Crash Map, which is records all these, you go back for the last 6 years, and there's slight incidents, and they're all relating around vehicles, not people. So statistically, I can see it's going to be a difficult ask. Anecdotally, I'm sorry, but I just don't see the validity for it. But the officer recommendations to go to consultation, so clearly that's where we would go with this, and let the process run its course. But I would add that I think that school one should be added in and given extra weight because of the nature of the area it's in, i.e. right outside of school.
So that was moved by Councillor Ayrton. Are you seconding that?
I will, yes.
Right, thank you. So we're speaking to that now, Councillor Brodigan, over to you.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to talk about. And for once, I find myself in agreement with Councillor Staveley, which is unusual. The first time for everything, yeah. I'm absolutely dumbfounded that, you know, some of these roads are considered okay for a 20-mile-an-hour limit, but not outside the school. I really find it, yeah, bizarre. I wholeheartedly think that it should be implemented outside the school. It doesn't need further investigation, because I think it should be mandatory that there's a 20-mile-an-hour limit outside all schools. And finally, I'd like to say this is a matter of road safety for everybody, for pedestrians particularly. And it doesn't matter whether it's popular or not. I think that shouldn't come into question when you're talking about children going to school. So yes, I support the school should be included.
Councillor Myers, then Councillor Williams.
You're very happy to support this. It's the lawyer in me. I can't help myself, Chairman. Can we just try and tidy up what we're actually recommending? I think if we look at 6.1 and 6.2, nobody has any problems with any of that. What we would like is a 6.3 that says that we would like the officers to continue to work on the area outside the school with the intention of introducing a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit there. I think that's probably the view of everybody in this room. So we could phrase it like that. If David could make a note of it, I think that covers all bases. And the only other point I'd sort of make is I understand policies on speed limits, and I understand policies on all sorts of things to do with highways. The thing that I've always found disappointing as a councillor is that what doesn't always get, in my view, the weight it should, is the impact that things have on people's perception of safety. It isn't just about statistics and whether a large number of people are being killed or maimed on a road. Feeling unsafe impacts on people's quality of life, and I think when we look at planning decisions and all the rest of it, that we should be allowed to have that in mind. Actually, we're not, and they aren't things that really are material planning considerations, but they should be. And I'll continue to bore on about that till they nail the lid down.
Councillor Williams.
I think most members are well aware that I'm not a huge fan of blanket 20-mile-an-hour zones. I am, however, very strongly in favour of 20-mile-an-hour limits outside all schools. I think it should be absolutely unequivocal, and Councillor Brodigan and I don't always agree. I concur entirely. The area outside the school should most definitely be a 20-mile-an-hour zone, and if the parish council have got funds available to purchase vehicle activated signs, well, that would seem to be the obvious location for it to be located if there is an issue over residual speed in that area. I would just also add that I have family that live in North Wales, and the blanket 20-mile-an-hour ban there is about as popular as the bubonic plague. In fact, in many cases, local authorities are going to be looking at the powers given to actually reverse the blanket 20-mile-an-hour ban, because what it actually does is have people driving on roads which are perfectly safe and capable of being driven on at 30 miles an hour becoming increasingly frustrated at being driven at 17 and 18 miles an hour, and can often lead to worse driving as a consequence. So I think speed limits should be set according to the safety of the road, rather than any political dogma. And in terms of safety, safety of children who are perhaps less likely to be road safety conscious when they're coming out of school and talking to their mates is, I think, an absolute priority.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I totally agree with what Councillor Mars has said, and Councillor Williams. I do not know this particular area, but one thing stood out to me when it says there aren't any pavements. Because quite honestly, in my patch in Cundall, there isn't a pavement. And it's been a devil's own job to get a speed limit at all, but that's now been given at 40 miles an hour. But when people are in danger because there's no pavement of being on the road, that is when the problems can happen. But I know there's got to be incidents and all the rest of it. But as a general question, Chair, can David perhaps request details of the programme of reviews, which was, I think, confirmed at full council by Councillor Keane Duncan, that was going to happen across North Yorkshire, as applies to Skipton and Ripon and Bishop Monkton and Newby, because I think it will be useful to see what the review position is across North Yorkshire as it affects our constituency here, just to see where we stand in the pecking order, because I think that would be very useful. Thank you, Chair.
David's scribbling, so I'm guessing that's happening. Councillor Ayrton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I would just like to come back in and say that these sites have been selected by Bentham Town Council. These are the ones they thought appropriate for 20-mile-an-hour speed limit to be introduced. There is many more roads and streets and estates within Bentham that aren't included. So it's not a blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. This is specific speed limits to specific roads that the town council have come up with and had them tested for speed. And again, I'd like to thank the town council for doing that work.
I've noticed some hands up the back of the room, but it is our debate. So just to say, Councillor, we've got 4 minutes.
I'll try and speak as swiftly as I can. There's no blanket area of 20 miles per hour zones in anywhere in the UK. That's the point to make here. I welcome the proposal of the from here that it's very reasonable, and it notes, if you read the report, or what they've said is they're happy with 40 become 30 or 20 in some cases. So they're very reasonable about which roads are 20 mile per hour. So we should recognise that. I'm fully support adding in the school. Surprised it's not. It's usually the first one. Similar speed results are made in MC of the East. We've got similar conditions in my division, roads without pavements. Traffic is likely to drop if people feel it's safer, especially to the school. Parents might think, I can walk my children to school instead of driving. Unfortunately, the parish which is Councillor Hasselstein's division, opposite me, a lot of kids are dropped off. The police don't enforce 20 mile per hour limits. We know that, but we know from, as it was said in the presentation, speeds have dropped in 20 mile per hour zones by, I think, 3 miles an hour on average. They've even dropped in 30 mile per hour limits where there's no enforcement. And as it says, there's £14 million saved in the first year. And also the then leader of Wales said, if it takes 10, 15, 20 seconds longer to drive through your town, is that not worth 10 children's lives a year? And I think this is worth people's lives in Bentham, and the people of Bentham have seemed to be supporting this, and I think we should support them. Isn't that democracy? So I fully support this recommendation, but it's been seconded anyway. So
Thank you. So we've had it moved and proposed with the same. I'm assuming everybody's happy with Councillor Myers' amendment of 4.3. That looking round, and probably do we need a vote? All those in favour? Is unanimous. So thank you very much, and back over to you, really, Darren, and to work with the parish council on making sure that and local interest groups that is delivered. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to do that. Thank you.
Cheers. We're now on to housing and housing strategy, partnerships and enabling affordable housing overview. And we have got we've got Sharon, Sarah and Angela. if you go up there and drag another chair up, Sharon. Do we have Councillor Myers as part of this show as well? Or? David's presented us with the slides, so we've got those. So if you want to whip through those, I'm guessing you're going to get quite a few questions on this. So just press the blue button, Sharon.
Okay, we're on. Right, okie dokie. So thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. We've pulled together some slides, not knowing, who knew what. Apologies if, we're teaching you to suck eggs and, but we were trying to cover as broad a brush as possible in a short space of time. So it's a whistle-stop tour really of like the housing strategy and enabling team, which is mostly sat here today in front of you. So I was going to go through who we are, what we do, a couple of headlines from the housing strategy, just to make you aware of the commitments that the council's made around housing, and really then focus in on affordable housing delivery and the different routes that we've got available to us to do that. Okay, so if we go to the next couple of slides, David, this is where we sit within the Community Development Directorate. So Andrew Rose, our AD of Housing, I'm sure you're all familiar with, and they're the heads of service. So Hannah Heineman is our head of service. That's housing, delivery and partnerships. And then our team below that is, we've got 2 housing strategy and policy officers. So Sarah's one of those. Angela's the senior enabler within the team, and then we still have our team of rural housing enablers, which Richard, you will be very familiar with from the work you did pre-LGR as the chair of the housing board. And we've been really fortunate up until the end of March. We've had some additional funding from DEFRA that has supported a post that we've worked very closely with through Community First Yorkshire, and it's Amanda Madden's been working with us on a dedicated role around sort of trying to find new rural exception sites. So if we just go to the housing strategy in the first instance, it's just a reminder really, because I'm sure you're all aware this was adopted by Council in May. So the strategy sets out the vision to ensure good quality, affordable, healthy and sustainable homes that meet the present and future needs of all our communities. And to do so, we've kind of set 3 thematic priorities, so people, places and homes. If we go on to the next slide, that's around with people, we're thinking about, preventing and tackling homelessness, recognising the needs of our population at all different life stages, and that wider piece around supported housing needs and specific needs groups. The next priority around places is about that growing the supply of affordable and available housing for our communities. Addressing the rural housing crisis and supporting communities through neighbourhood renewal and regeneration where that's needed. And then with the homes, this is very much around retrofitting, decarbonisation. So it's about, there's a real ambition there around decarbonising our own housing stock and making those homes more energy efficient and affordable to live in. And tackling fuel poverty and ensuring the other side of that is ensuring that new homes that are delivered contribute to those sort of net zero housing ambitions. We're looking at addressing stock condition issues and improving poor quality homes across all tenures, and we know that there's real prevalence in the private rented sector around poor quality, so there's work being done across the service to try and prioritise and tackle that. And ensuring that our own homes as a landlord meet the decent home standards, and that we're fully compliant with the regulator of social housing in terms of the consumer standards. So just in terms of what does some of that, all those words, what do they look like in terms of some of the commitments? So if we go on to the next slide, these are just a few of the headlines. So bearing in mind that as a new council, the housing service has, not been around that long. This is, I hope you will feel reflects the level of ambition within the service. So we've had a business plan approved to deliver 90 units of temporary accommodation across North Yorkshire. 60 of those units will be delivered directly by the council's own in-house housing delivery team. There's work being done around consolidating housing needs and evidence bases. I'm sure you appreciate, we're still operating across actually 9 local plans in the case of our teams, because we're a housing authority. We work across the 2 national parks. We're not just focused on the North Yorkshire local plan area. So we've done a lot of work around needs and evidence bases, which is a real key building block in terms of when we're looking at affordable delivery. There's work being done with our housing association partners about the affordable housing delivery plan. So at the moment, based on the figures from the legacy local plans, there's an identified need for around 800 homes a year. There's a piece of work being done at the moment as part of the new council's local plan. It's called a housing economic development needs assessment, HEDNA. It's basically like an evidence base around housing needs and economic needs and bringing all that together. So though that 800 figure is likely to change as that new evidence base emerges around the new local plan. There's a business plan in place from the housing revenue account for the council as a landlord to deliver 500 new homes over 5 years, and that's really ambitious. We've got, new local plan emerging, and we need to be thinking about how those new housing local plan policies adapt to the needs that we've got around the need for accessible, adaptable housing, affordable housing need, and low carbon, making sure we're building efficient new homes across the patch, really. There's going to be a new strategic place partnership that will be emerging through the Mayoral Combined Authority, and very much we need to be working with partners and the Mayoral Combined Authority about what that looks like and where those priorities around new investment are. And there's loads of stuff going on around reviewing land assets. We've all come together as a new authority and trying to make sure that where we can, we prioritise the delivery of affordable housing on those opportunities, land opportunities. I touched on the DEFRA funding for the RHE programme, so that's yielded lots of opportunities and some additional capacity, and we're waiting to find out whether there's any more funding for the next financial year for that. There's an enabling review going on in terms of working with our partners who fund our rural housing enablers and some of our enabling services to see, what the future looks like, and can we refresh that partnership? And that actually brings in some revenue to help support staff costs to deliver these enabling services. There's work being done around council tax for second homes, and there's an ambition that is used for addressing housing needs and affordable housing priorities. So there's going to be a paper coming to members, I think, early in the new year around proposals for that. We've got a housing improvement plan in place in terms of the meeting the regulatory standards. So that's as a landlord. There's a new tenancy strategy out for consultation at the moment, and that shapes and sets priorities for RPs around how we want all social housing tenancies to be set out in North Yorkshire. And there, the list goes on. I touched on private rented sector. The carbon negative route map is being refreshed by the Mayoral Combined Authorities, and we need to be making sure we're linking in with that. And then last but not least on that list is around tackling rural and coastal housing crisis. So, how do we do that? What's affordable housing anyway? I think it's all quite confusing. And ironically, today the government is announcing the new planning policy framework. So whether the definition of affordable housing changes, I don't know. I have just looked and it hasn't been changed. It's still the base based on the other one. We're hoping that it might remove the requirement for first homes from the definition, because our evidence all shows that doesn't actually really meet one of our needs. But basically, affordable housing is defined in the national planning policy frameworks, and it's housing for sale or rent for those whose needs are not met by the market, including housing that provides a subsidised route to home ownership. So that's shared ownership, discount market sale. So if we can go on to the next slide, there's just any of these are classed as affordable housing. So yeah, affordable housing for rent, so that could be social rent or it could be affordable rent. So affordable rent is defined as being anything up to 80% of the market rent. And that's quite a challenge because actually as market rents have increased since COVID, so have rents, market rents. So the affordable rent, 80% of market rent figure has increased, whereas, you know, our local incomes haven't. So actually, you know, there are, you know, social rent is becoming more and more the main genuinely affordable tenure for local communities. The starter homes, there's discount market sale homes that have to be at least 20% below open market value, and there are other routes, primarily rent to buy or shared ownership, and I'd mentioned first homes. I think what's really important to think about when we're thinking about what does affordable housing mean in North Yorkshire is what is it that people can actually afford. And I think that Hedner piece I talked about before, the findings from that are going to be really important. And certainly, you know, initial feeling is that it looks like social rent is the mainly affordable tenure now. If we go on to the next slide. So here I'm trying to kind of just summarise on a page what are the delivery routes. So I think if on this side here, closest to me, the local plan allocated sites you'll all be familiar with. You know, it's a mix of market and affordable homes. It's privately financed, so there's a requirement on a developer to provide an element of affordable housing on these sites. Yeah, there are challenges to that, and viability affects the amount of housing that can be delivered. And then at the other side of the slide, we've got those land-led opportunities. There tend to be rural exception sites, although we might, you know, we do sometimes get 100% affordable housing sites coming forward where a housing association acquires a site. It could be an allocated site and they choose to bring it forward as 100% affordable housing. And bearing in mind, when we're talking about 100% affordable housing, we're talking about a mix of maybe social rent, affordable rent, some shared ownership. So there's a blend of those different affordable tenures on there. And that lighter blue side in the middle, that's the space that we as a team, we work in there. So we're working in partnership with landowners, developers, registered providers, community organisations, Homes England, you know, funders, to try and bring forward those homes, maximise those opportunities so that we can try and start, you know, meeting those 800 homes a year. So the next slide just summarises that really. So it's just to say, you know, we deliver the homes in partnership with developers, RPs and communities. And we do that through those Section 106 affordable housing opportunities on those allocated sites where we're working with developers. The 100% affordable housing sites, which include those rural exception sites. And as I said before, this is across the national park. Community-led housing. So we've got an increasing pipeline of community-led housing, which is, you know, across North Yorkshire and you know, really exciting because those homes are, you know, the communities are really invested in those homes and it's great to see when they come forward. And then through that wider York and North Yorkshire Housing Partnership, which is where all the 23 RPs actively developing across North Yorkshire and City of York and North Yorkshire Council have come together to you know, try and work more collaboratively to meet the challenges of delivery. And then the latter bullet points there around direct delivery as a team. So within Hannah's service area, there's delivery teams looking at delivering that 500 homes over 5 years commitment. And there's some work being done as well around a joint venture. And I'm sure my colleagues would love to come back and talk to you about that if that was something that you'd want to know a bit more about. If we can bob on to, sorry, the next slide, jump forward to the next slide. Actually, it's just to show you what we've kind of delivered. So since NYC was formed, you know, in 2023-24, there were over 1,000 affordable homes delivered across North Yorkshire, across a range of tenures. And you'll see there, you know, affordable rent was the largest tenure. And I do acknowledge those concerns and challenges, which Councillor Myers and I've discussed many times around, you know, social rent. I think it's probably worth saying that social rent, Homes England have only been able to fund social rent across North Yorkshire outside of Harrogate relatively recently, there was a decision made quite a long time ago that grant funding for social rent homes wouldn't be available in North Yorkshire outside of Harrogate. So we've historically under-delivered on social rent. But, going back to that point I made earlier about increasing market rents, 80% of a market rent is increasingly unaffordable to local people and housing need. So social rent is becoming more and more important. So I'm really hopeful that as we progress forward, with new schemes working with partners, we'll see that social rent figure increase. Homes England are putting more grant into social rent, so therefore it becomes more viable to deliver. However, it is still challenging. So, we're working really closely through that wider housing partnership, pushing our partners as much as we can to deliver those homes at that social rent level. And then the 24-25 mid-year estimates, I think, we tried to dig out some figures for Craven and Harrogate because the figures are still monitored on those legacy local plans. So I don't know, Sarah, if you've got any.
So for 23-24, final figures for Craven Legacy.
Oh, you need to.
Craven Legacy was 55 units in total, 28 affordable rent and 27 shared ownership. Harrogate was 546. With a split of 275 affordable rent, social rent 120, rent to buy 21, and shared ownership 130. Mid-year here, I haven't obviously done Q3 yet, but Craven affordable rent 10, shared ownership 9, and then for Harrogate it's affordable rent 121, social rent 15, rent to buy 6, and shared ownership 52, with a total of 194 to. What would that have been? End of June? No, end of September. Sorry. Yeah. So we can let you have those figures separately afterwards. So just managed to pull those together. Okay, if we go on to the next slide. So how do we pay for the affordable housing? So when it's the developer contribution on a qualifying site, that means those plan process, those local plan sites where there's an affordable housing requirement, is funded through the developer contribution. So there isn't grant going into those homes. Where it's an affordable housing site that's 100% affordable housing, whether that's a rural exception site or an allocated or a windfall site that an RP is bringing forward, or even the council, that would rely on grant funding. So where does the grant come from? Homes England, the Affordable Homes Programme, or whether the RP is a strategic partner, where they have a pot to spend over a given period of time and deliver a certain level of commitments. That's all agreement between them and Homes England. So we have a number of strategic partners we work with. Otherwise, we're relying on people bidding, including ourselves, into the Affordable Homes Programme, which kind of ran out of money over the summer. There's been a little bit of a top up, but it's quite restricted as to the availability of AHP at the minute, which is stalling delivery, not just here, but across the country. So the Section 106 commuted sums, that's where if it's not suitable or for whatever reason we can't deliver the sites on an allocated site through that, the developer contribution, sometimes we might get a commuted sum paid into a pot and we can use that to top up. That often happens. Thinking about rural exception sites, certainly in former districts and boroughs where they delivered rural exception sites, we would often top up from that commuted sums pot to bridge the gap between what Homes England could pay and what the costs were. RP subsidy from their recycle capital grant, that's where maybe people buy shares in their homes or they exercise their right to acquire, and that money goes into a recycle capital grant pot at an RP, and they can dip into that sometimes to top up. And there are other pots like the Brownfield Housing Fund, and we're hoping that maybe potentially we can use some of the council tax second homes money in that way to help deliver where we've got stalled sites. Next slide. I'm going to hand over to Angela because you've heard more than enough from me. This was on the back of, I think, when we had a paper that went to executive in November about the Community Housing Fund monies and seeking approval to use some of the council tax second homes money to top up our Community Housing Fund pot. So we thought it'd be helpful to just sort of do a few slides on community, what is community-led housing and, what we're doing in that space going forward now we've got that approval. So
over to you. Sorry, there we go. Cheers. So yes, community-led housing. Essentially, community-led housing is around communities identifying a housing need in their local area and coming together to form groups to then look at how they could deliver solutions to those housing needs. It can be done in a variety of different ways, both in how the group is legally constituted and how the group actually delivers those homes, how through to how they're built and delivered and managed. That can all be done in several different ways. Historically, community-led housing in North Yorkshire. I used to work for a community-led housing hub for North Yorkshire and East Riding, and that was going from December 2020. In that time, we saw the pipeline of community-led housing groups coming forward rose from around 9 groups initially to 24 that we're currently working with, live groups at various different stages throughout the process. In terms of the concept of community-led housing and the definition of community-led housing, there are 3 main points. The first is a requirement that meaningful community engagement and consent occurs throughout the process. So you're working, it is what it says, it's community-led, so it's driven by the community. The community doesn't necessarily have to initiate and manage the development process or build the homes themselves, though some may choose to do so, and that goes down to the different ways that a group may choose to work. The local community group or organisation owns, manages or stewards the land or homes and in a manner of their choosing, and a requirement that the benefits to the local area and or specified community must be clearly defined and legally protected in perpetuity through an asset lock. Sorry. Yeah. So in terms of the Community Housing Fund, historically, each of the districts across North Yorkshire, apart from Selby, received Community Housing Fund from central government initially. And when we went through to the unitary, there was some legacy funding still sitting with some of those district councils. And so we took a paper to executive on the 5th of November to look at the remaining funding and to look at some further funding from the council tax second homes. And this was to continue the support for the groups that we'd seen coming forward. So we'd been working hard with these groups, and obviously they've got the potential to deliver homes. And what we didn't want to see was that the support dropped off either through enabling support or financial support. So as I say, we took a report to executive on the 5th of November around the Community Housing Fund framework, what that funding could be used for, how it could be used, eligibility, and in terms of the different stages of community-led housing, how that could be, how that funding could be used. So there is an element around community development, and that is around forming the community group and the legal constitution and the community engagement at the start of the process. There's then some funding for feasibility work and working up those ideas and surveys and taking it up to planning. And then there is funding that will be available for the actual development of the homes themselves. And just in terms of a couple of examples of what community-led housing can look like, we've got a couple, if you want to bob onto the next slide. So this is one up in Bainbridge Methodist Chapel. The group initially had been working on their own and then formed a partnership with North Star Housing Association. So it's Upperdale's Community Land Trust and North Star. It's Bainbridge Methodist Chapel, and it's 2 2-bedroom flats for affordable rent for local residents. They started in January, they started the conversion in January 24 and completed by August 2024. So that's a relatively quick turnaround. Had the support of the Rural Housing Enabler, the National Park, and the former community-led housing hub. It was a blended finance arrangement and received grant funding from the former Richmond District Council through the Community Housing Fund. And importantly, the group have got really strong
relationships with the registered provider and are looking at creating a pipeline of future projects using a registered provider and CLT partnership model. And then the next, oh, sorry, that's Bainbridge again.
Yeah.
And then another example is in Hudswell, which is Hudswell Community Charity. Bainbridge chose to work with a registered provider, which is one of the ways that you can deliver the homes. Hudswell have always worked on their own. They're a community charity. Hudswell's a small village in the national park. The group worked with the Rural Housing Enabler again and the national park, produced a housing needs survey which identified a local need, and then went on to develop 2 3-bedroom bungalows and 1 2-bedroom bungalow for those with a local connection. And again, this started in March 2016 and completed by November 2017. So a relatively quick turnaround in terms of development again. And again, this was blended finance, but Richmondshire District Council used some of the community housing fund for that. And the group has actually just completed an additional 3 lifetime homes using modern methods of construction. And in actual fact, they're a modular home, and part of it has been actually a community self-build. So the community have been involved in the actual delivery of these homes themselves. So is that,
yeah, I think that's it.
So that's an overview of community-led housing and the potential. And like I say, you know, we have been working with 24 sort of live groups at various different stages, and now we've secured the funding. We're in a position to be able to offer the enabling services and the financial services to help deliver those affordable homes.
Right, I'll go from the chair first. You didn't expect it. The RHE programme, something that's close to my heart. The difficulty of delivering in rural areas and getting the communities on board has always been difficult, and bringing that land forward and the people forward. We had got it funded a lot by the RPs. There was some input from the local authorities, but mainly the RPs were funding it. And you said you're renegotiating that. Is that looking like positive that they're coming on board?
Yes, so through the wider partnership approach now, it's sort of like an enabling. So there was also a financial kind of development partnership arrangement across Craven and Harrogate. So obviously the 2 agreements or arrangements needed to be reviewed. So we've just been feeding back to RPs after doing some consultation and engagement with them. So we're very clear about what it is, the services that they value and what they're what they're prepared to support. So we're actively involved in that conversation at the minute. But yeah, I think there's ongoing support for that. Yeah, continuing, and certainly from the national parks who contribute specifically towards the RHE posts, definitely. And I think they're so the commitments within our own housing strategy, and the need within those local plans, and thinking about the parks and the need for rural exception sites in both of the parks. I just think we couldn't deliver, those homes wouldn't come forward without the RHE. So it's an essential service to keep that supply going. And we have got a really healthy pipeline at the minute, Chair. Certainly over in terms of rural exception sites, it's looking good, isn't it? It's yeah. In the moors, but also you know, certainly with the Upperdale CLT, they've got some ambitions about trying to build a rural exception site pipeline. So it's really exciting, you know.
I'll start here and work my way around the room with millions of pounds went up.
Yeah, I mean, obviously these land trusts. I mean, I've got some of that going on in my division, and I just wonder at what point do we stop funding them if they're not actually delivering anything? Because it's public money at the end of the day, it's been spent. I've got a land trust in my division that hasn't delivered anything. They've been offered, I think they were offered some through Craven Districts and they refused those, as I understand it. And the only other projects I've heard of are, you know, taking on renovated properties that would be should we say, quite onerously expensive to run because of the low energy efficiency of the property. So, and it would seem that the biggest Achilles heel of this process has been the fact that the land is very difficult to come by to build on that's not already being commercially taken up. Other than that, affordable housing does come forward on the bigger sites as part of the affordable housing provision of 30%, according to our local plan as it stands. So, you know, at what stage do we stop flogging the dead horse, dare I say? Because it does feel like if you've got so far and you're still not getting anywhere, are we not throwing good money after bad? And yet you've got some projects, you know, some land trusts are doing really good work and actually delivering. And ultimately, if that's the point, it has to be about delivery. So I'm just a little bit concerned about that because I don't want to keep, you know, us to keep throwing money when we've got obviously financial pressures all around in North Yorkshire, not least in housing, when there may be more how can I put it, more efficient models of delivering affordable housing to the population.
Two things to that to start with, and I'll let Angela sort of come in. One is in terms of delivery and the patterns of delivery across North Yorkshire is quite interesting because across the whole of North Yorkshire except Craven and Harrogate, there is a pipeline of rural exception sites. There's a track record of delivery on rural exception sites, but less so. And a lot of that is around like local plan, policies and approaches. And I don't think the Harrogate local plan has a rural exception site policy. So, there was also allocated sites, and the view was taken that that was the route to delivery. To allocate sites and deliver on those sites through the affordable housing, it's more efficient, which I completely understand and agree that it's a good way of delivering, and it certainly delivers the numbers, as you can tell from the figures that Sarah said earlier in terms of Harrogate. However, what it doesn't do is it doesn't address those needs of rural communities. So delivering, large scale allocated sites in our major market towns doesn't help support our rural villages and communities where there's a need, and it doesn't help support the infrastructure, the schools, the shop and everything else in those localities. So I think we need to have a balance, and I think what we were talking earlier about the rural premium is no different in terms of housing delivery. If you want to deliver in your rural areas, there's a premium to that. There's a higher cost, and it's the scale, it's the lack of economies of scale and everything else. I think it's about a commitment to meeting those needs in those communities, and that's why I think the CLT model can be really beneficial. I mean, looking at the Hudswell one, the community there did have some land asset, but they did one scheme, but then they're like, oh, that would work so well, we want to do another one. And I think it's about recognizing there isn't a one size fit all solution. Hear what you're saying about the funding, and I think that's part of what we were trying to do with the framework. So I'm sure Angela probably wants to come in around that and sort of setting out clear financial boundaries around that, and bringing in different ways of assessing. Historically, there were 7 different ways of doing it, and we've still got some legacy projects linked to that, I think, which is what you're probably referring to.
Well, yes, I mean, you can't build on fresh air. Sorry. Oh.
Yeah, so just in terms of that, I think firstly, historically, there's never been a consistent, other than the first tranche of community housing fund that came forward from central government, there hasn't been a consistent flow of funding coming forward. So communities haven't, these things take volunteer hours, they take a lot of hard work to do, delivery is hard to do, and it can fluctuate because hasn't been a consistent route to funding. So that is why some of these schemes haven't come forward, particularly in the revenue side of things. There hasn't been guaranteed funding for revenue, and so it has historically been quite difficult for some of these projects to get off the ground. And in terms of the framework, when we were developing the framework, we were very clear around what communities will be required to do and demonstrate in terms of receiving funding and how they plan to take that forward. We've got the enabling service that will be able to support them in the enabling, and what they needed was, you know, to know that there's some funding there for them to go forward and put those hours in and put that work in. We've made sure that there will be accountability for the funding that goes out, so that we can monitor the progress that the groups are making. And in terms of the, you know, the amounts of funding that will be available at the varying stages, there is obviously a smaller amount available at community development stage, and we will monitor closely whether we feel that that project has the legs to go further and how we can support that to happen. And then at the next point, we will be checking whether that project can take it forward as to whether it will get more funded. So we will be monitoring it closely. Community groups will be sort of accountable for making sure that there's progress, and we'll be helping to bring that forward as well. So this is, you know, again, it's a partnership.
Thank you. Yeah, as I say, you can't build on fresh air. At the end of the day, if you haven't got the mechanisms there to be able to deliver the housing, then surely we've got to be a bit more rational about where we do let the funding go, because clearly some can and some aren't, and
yes, and
that is the focus.
Prioritisation is key.
Yeah.
We'll be prioritising and looking particularly at groups that are looking to deliver a pipeline of schemes and not necessarily just a one-off. There may be opportunities where, for the community's benefit and for that community, it is absolutely right that it is a conversion of a unit or a couple of units, and that's what would.
Well, am I just come in because I think David's under a misapprehension of Sorry, I think David's under a misapprehension that we're funding community land trusts that aren't doing anything. We aren't, and this won't. It'll only fund them if they are doing something.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. A couple of things. Just something I wanted to share with the room really was I heard one of the Hudswell Community Group speak recently, and I think it's important for everyone to understand that one of the reasons for their success was actually they were given support with their first project, which was actually buying a pub. And then they went from there to buying the village shop. And then they went from there to building their bungalows. And now they're building the next phase. So whilst it's all in its infancy, I think it's a really good example of how once a group understands how it can work, they get the confidence and then it grows from there. So I understand we may not be seeing much going on at the moment, but there's a really good example of when it works, how really well it can work. My second question, sorry, did you want to say something?
Am I on or not?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, and that is another thing that we'll be putting in place, is peer support from successful community groups that have delivered this. We will be developing a network of peer support so that other groups coming forward can go and see the various different projects, how it's worked, and talk to the people that have already delivered to see how they would go ahead and do it.
Can I just come in and say, working?
Yeah, journal.
Oh, me as well.
I think that the Hudswell Group also owned their land, if I'm not wrong. So they had a head start in the first place because they owned land. Obviously not the pub, but the land that they built on, the parish or the group owned that land.
That brings me on to my second question, which is to do with finding sites. And Angela, I might be wrong, but I think this is something you might have looked into before, and it's something that I always think about when I drive past old council housing estates where those built in the 60s and 70s would all have been given garages, which are now sitting either redundant, empty, or not used for housing cars, that's for sure. And many of them will still actually be owned by the council, apart from those which have been bought under the right to buy. So for me, that seems to be such an obvious spot to be building, creating units of housing, even on small scale, be it community-led or led by the council. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I'll come in on that because the Craven and Harrogate areas have had when they were the legacy authorities, have built on those sites, and the ones that we were able to build on, they've either been built on or sold as building plots. So there won't be many left, but the ones that are left have probably got big sewerage systems underneath them or big pipes, and there was a reason why we haven't had them in our build programme as the council building the homes for the council.
And just in terms of community-led housing, though, there are projects around the country that have done exactly that and been really successful community-led housing projects. So yeah, it can be done, and it has been done in other areas. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just Craven and Harrogate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it has been done before. Yeah, very successfully.
So I didn't that way around the room, Councillor Hull.
Thank you. So I think we all know it's really hard to deliver affordable homes. And there's probably a greater demand for affordable homes than any other kind of home that there is, particularly in North Yorkshire, where we've got an ageing population. And so we really need to enable young people so they can stay and live in this area. I think the information that we've gleaned from the data is it's easier to deliver affordable homes in urban areas on large sites because developers can afford to do that, and there's no real incentive for them to develop in rural areas. But if I look at HG3, which is the postcode area for Burstwith and Washburn, or Washburn and Burstwith, sorry, the average home, got that right. The average price of a home in HG3 is just under £400,000. So an affordable home by definition is a home that costs £320,000. So if you're a first-time buyer with a 5% deposit, you need a mortgage of £304,000 to buy your first home, which means you need a household income of around £75,000 as a first-time buyer to buy your first home, which is just not attainable for anyone. So we've got this problem where we need rural homes, but people just can't afford them. I think one of the problems with community-led housing is it places a massive obligation or a burden, a bureaucratic burden on local communities to solve their own housing problems. And that in itself is a disincentive to local people. Think, well, how do we get started? We don't know what to do about this. So to me, it seems that we need to ramp up cooperation with developers to deliver these homes, and possibly we need to look at working more closely with local traditional builders that know an area. The biggest problem that I perceive in actually delivering homes is the premium that you pay for the land, because it costs more or less a few pounds more, a few £1,000s more to deliver 3 miles outside of Harrogate than it would inside Harrogate in terms of build cost. It's the land issue that's the problem, and the cost of the land that pushes the prices up. So one of the things is almost a problem with the rural housing exception policy. It's there to enable developers to build on green belt in the countryside where it falls outside of the local development plan. But we have an opportunity going forward with the new local development plan to designate smaller sites in rural areas where maybe each village can take 4 or 5 houses. Now, this is a question I don't know the answer to, but if you look at the existing legislation, like the National Parks and Countryside Act, I think it's 1948 or 1949, you can have local occupancy restrictions on development sites. Is it possible to tie that into the allocation of development sites in the local plan to say, we've got these sites here, but it would be for local housing only as defined under the Act? Because that in itself would regulate the house pricing or the land price, because you could only build a certain kind of house that's only available to a certain kind of person. So even though it might not be designated as affordable housing, it would result in bringing the price down potentially, because you've reduced the amount of the scope of people who can buy it. So it's another way of regulating house pricing.
That's quite interesting, you know, the whole local occupancy, primary residency thing. I think there's a very live debate with national parks around that. It has its merits and it has its disadvantages. All I would say is the local occupancy housing, I can't remember off the top of my head but I can find it somewhere. Sorry, I just got so many bits of information in my head. I can't draw on that particular one at the moment. What that does to the open market value of a property, it knocks it down a bit, but it still won't get anywhere near being affordable. Allocating a small site, which will effectively be for market development, but with a local occupancy connection, isn't actually going to deliver the kind of affordable housing that probably will bring people in. The rural exception site policy, the land value on it. Well, Angela can talk chapter and verse on this really, but rural exception sites, it's or what do we say, 10 to 12 care plot. So that is vastly different to what you'd be talking about if it was an allocated site for, say, 5 homes. It would be more than that. So I think the rural exception site policy is very effective in terms of allowing small sites in rural settlements to come forward. They don't even have to be that small. I mean, Cornwall brings forward very large rural exception sites. And I do think that the rural exception site policy is important. I think, am I right? Is your patch in the what was AONB, the National Landscape? Yeah, and that's been a real challenge. So we've been trying to engage with the National Landscape. So we've been looking at sites in some, people come and talk to us about land opportunities. And when we go and talk to our development management colleagues, the view is, well, absolutely no, we can't do any development outside of those allocated sites. So those allocated sites that have come forward in, the National Landscape have delivered some affordable homes, but only in those localities. And outside of that, nothing has been able to come forward because there's no rural exception site policy. So that's been quite challenging. So we've been trying to talk to the National Landscape actually about they're reviewing their management plan. I think Angela and I are going to talk to them at hopefully one of their future meetings, just to talk about options around how to make sure that we're bringing forward genuinely affordable homes, because as you quite rightly say, the figures are, they just don't make sense for people who are on a median income. So.
And if I just touch on your first point around it being a burden on communities, asking them to develop their own housing, that's not what we would do. This is community led because it's driven by a community with the ambition and drive and desire to solve their own problems for their community, because they know their community intrinsically and they know what's needed and how they would like to deliver it. So it's just that it is community led. We're not saying you need to be doing this. They're coming to us and saying we want to do this, and we're saying we'll help you to do that.
I think, and maybe helpful to know that just in other parts of the country, so in the southwest, they've got a model of community led housing, which has been quite influential in terms of the Upperdale CLT. That is around them, their CLTs actually delivering exception sites going forward, working with RPs to do that. So it's a group it's a model that has worked successfully elsewhere, and I certainly know it's something that the Upperdales group are looking to model.
It
really.
is, yeah, and it's so down in Cornwall, they've delivered 200 properties just doing just this, and they've got another 600 in the pipeline. So delivering with CLT-RP partnerships on rural exception sites. So there is a history of that working really successfully.
But it is not one size fits all.
No.
Yeah, just quickly, I would urge you just to have a look at local occupancy restrictions, though, because I know from my day job, actually the local occupancy properties sell anywhere between 20 and 25% less than the market value. So it isn't a small amount, it's actually quite a big amount.
Absolutely, and I think that's something for the new local plan to look at. Absolutely, yeah, especially in that protected landscape, it's got to be part of the conversation.
And for 25 grand and with evidence base, you can normally get them removed, as the national parks have suffered under for decades now. That where's you put it on with the best intentions in the first place, actually keeping them there and proving that they can stay there and that they do give that 20 to 25% discount, it's very, very difficult. So the nice ideas, but you need to be able to really then enforce them in law. And at the moment, we can't hold every single house. It might have to go to planning committees and everything else, but it's difficult. I'm mindful of time. I'll come to Councillor Nolan. Do you have any points on this? Councillor Brown, are you happy? Or be brief.
I've got something to say. And this relates to one of my constituents, Gordon West, where Angela came and we had a meeting. And I'm hoping that Councillor Mars will come and have a look at this, the potential of the plan that Gordon put forward under community-led housing. Now, Angela, you came back and said it didn't meet the government requirements in terms of space, I think.
or the nationally described space standards.
Yeah, now, the government can change regulations. They're just about to do it with the National Planning Policy Framework. So I think we ought to put something to government that space doesn't need to be quite as big as they are looking at under current legislation. Because these houses that you saw and I saw have a rent, including council tax and energy, of around £450 a month, and cost probably 60, 70 if it's including the land, thousand to build. And it's based on Scandinavian chalets. Rural exception sites would be very interesting to roll that out across North Yorkshire. And there may be some problems about the style of the buildings and all the rest of it. But if you are young or are old and elderly, a rent of that sort of amount of money is affordable. I mean, affordable, as Councillor said over there, affordable rent is now hugely out of most people's scope. And I think that if you can get that price of the house or the chalet or whatever down, then you've got a chance of getting an affordable rent or affordable property to buy. And I personally think, and I hope that Councillor Myers will come, he has said he's going to come and have a look, and we'll make the time to just have a look at that particular idea, because I don't know what your feeling was after several months now since we've been talking about it. I thought it was a good idea.
Yes, it is a good idea, but I think I think the feedback is to all of these schemes that fundamentally there is still a planning process to adhere to, and any development that comes forward will need to satisfy that planning process and the requirements in the local plan as well. And if the local plan is saying that you have to adhere to the affordable housing delivered in that area must meet nationally described space standards, then that needs to happen. So so community-led housing will come forward, but within the constraints of the planning process, and we still need to work through.
Well, planning processes are beginning to change now, and the space requirements under law are changing, may or could be changed, if it meant more houses coming and satisfying the need that is there. And to have a chalet, which they have in good measure in Scandinavia, that doesn't cost very much to build. Okay, the lifetime, it may not be quite as good as the houses you've shown, and I don't know what the capital cost of these two houses you've shown in your report are, but it'd be considerably more than 70 or 80,000. So I just mention that in passing because I think Gordon West scheme has some merit and could be rolled out. Rural exception sites are exceptions. And, all we're wanting to do is provide housing for the people who need housing.
Perspective on this though, Nick, if it doesn't make planning requirements, it doesn't make planning requirements. And there are reasons for planning requirements because you've actually got to future-proof this housing. So it's all right saying it'll do for one person at the moment, but that person then might meet a partner and then it no longer satisfies them because it won't fit two people. So these are the things why planning laws are there. And we do have to adhere to planning laws. And unfortunately, the RHE team, and even on the exception side, we can't get away from planning laws.
I'm Harrogate prior to being North Yorkshire, and I've looked at this site and numerous times with Mr. West, and it's not just about the size standards. The site that he's putting forward has big issues as well regarding the amount of noise on the A19 and the actual new development that's adjacent to his site. There was big problems there with the developer getting approval due to that noise, and his is right next to the site.
Mr. Chairman, I understand that. I'm very fully conscious of that. But it's not just for his site, it could be other sites across North Yorkshire, because the principle is the housing is relatively cheap. And there's a lot of vested interest here in developers and all the rest of it who want to make huge sums of money, as most of the developers have been doing in recent times.
Councillor Tyne, are you happy? Councillor Murdo?
On page 70, we have this delivery pathways and support, and it says working in partnership with landowners. Does that include us, North Yorkshire, who own quite a bit of land that we've inherited from the district?
I'm delighted to say it does, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
because that can deliver the affordable housing path bit because the land's already there. They don't,
Yeah.
developers don't have to spend a fortune buying the land.
So, yeah,
Just
so
putting
there's
that
like, yeah, there's property, colleagues in property and our delivery team particularly linked in with them. Absolutely, yes.
I've ignored you, Councillor Myers, because you talk housing every day, but do you want to say anything before we depart?
Just very briefly, I'm not going to start debating chalets and all the rest of it. Certainly not here. I think it's really important that members realise that North Yorkshire is probably exceptional in the way that it is raising funding by a second homes council tax premium to spend on issues relating to housing. And when people who are of different political persuasions to the controlling group on North Yorkshire have a pop at them, they might just look at the controlling groups across the country of different political persuasions who were not doing this, who were propping up their general fund budgets with a tax raised on second homes. So this was our commitment and we're sticking to it. And we're sticking to it despite the fact that the government cut £14.5 million from our rural services support grant last week. We're still not going to spend this premium on popping up services. The £1 million to community-led housing is one aspect of what we're trying to do. There is no single solution. This is in its place a really good programme because it can deliver where we can't, and it can deliver where other registered providers struggle. So we're very happy to do that. Amongst other things we're considering with the rest of the money, and a policy will be coming to full council in due course, it is the way in which we can help things be delivered as social rent rather than affordable by bridging that viability gap, because we've got the money to do it. So it's not just about us doing things ourselves, it's about us seeing the right mix of social, affordable and private housing delivered across North Yorkshire. And we've got a fantastic team on board. I'm very proud to be associated with them. So watch this space, but where North Yorkshire leads, others will have to follow if they're going to meet this. And I think we are rather held up as an exemplar of best practice, certainly in terms of what we're intending to achieve.
And final one from me, all members in this room, part of your role is one of these things is to actually try to go out there, seek out those landowners that own those lands, seek out those parish councils, have that bit of land that might do a house, and get them to bring it forward. And whichever model you use, the team there will help them deliver housing on that, or will deliver housing on that. It doesn't really matter, but you know, it's our job as much as anything. We are supposed to be that conduit between the council and our communities. So get in there and do your work. Thank you. Thank you all very much. We'll move on to we're going to move our next item 12, to the back of the agenda so we can do it when everybody's gone home, bar us. So that, oh, sorry, no, we're not. We're doing the impact of tourism now, and then we'll move the exempt type. So item 11, impact of tourism. It's really over to members' debate on where we want to go with this, and are we taking it to a scrutiny committee? If we're having a working group for ourselves, are we going to sit, who's going to sit on it? And do we want officers or whatever to come in and speak to us on this? I'm open. Councillor Staveley, it was sort of you fired into this, so.
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, clearly I think there is still problems. there was some movement, I feel, following the last time that we looked at this as a district council. We made recommendations. I think, you know, we can get an update on those recommendations and sort of work from there. Obviously, the national parks in this particular area being the destination of a lot of the tourism, but not exclusively, had a part to play. And it will be interesting to hear what they've got to say, how they see things have progressed since we last asked them to look at their policies, not least littering. You know, I think one of my residents in Horton found his first McDonald's wrapper in March. Nearest McDonald's to Horton's 25 miles away. You know, we've got beauty spots like Stainforth Force, where don't ask me why somebody does this, but when they finish drinking their bottle of beer, they try and push the bottle into the ground as far as they can and then smash it off flush, so that you've got broken glass sticking up out of the ground in a field that may have animals or even people walking barefoot, because as I say, it's where people go swimming. So that's the sort of thing that happens. As I say, majority tourism, great, you know, people behave and respect, but there is certainly a cohort that don't, and I think we need to try and make sure that we try and, wherever possible, mitigate that, because ultimately it's the residents that we represent who are the ones who face the biggest impacts, and they are still facing those impacts. So maybe an update on the various bodies that we wrote to initially, and then go from there would be a good starting point, perhaps.
I probably can't blame the McDonald's wrapper on tourism in general, because it could be a local who chucked it out of the window just as easy, possibly. So that, but I do get there is still issues. I do feel in my area probably we've peaked somewhat for now, at least post pandemic and that post influx. But I agree. But so is it that we want to do specific areas? Because obviously the Horton one appears to be still that area. Obviously Linton Falls still, but it's private. It's privately owned land. It's very difficult with Linton Falls, and there's a footpath going through it. And what are we doing? I'm just mindful that when we come out of this, we can have a go, come in, sit and have a moan at whatever organisation we want to. But if they can't actually do anything to deliver anything, then we're a bit stuck.
If we come back, clearly one thing that was a source of great ire at the time when we looked at this originally was the National Parks policy of not having bins, because they rather glibly tell us that their visitors take their rubbish home, which clearly they don't. On the whole, there's an awful lot of rubbish distributed along the A65, and I'm sure it's not locals who can't be bothered to wait until they get home. As a result, we end up with parish councils in these beauty spots like Stainforth, like Horning Mills, and I dare say one's in your division and other people's divisions that they're aware of. Those parish councils who don't want their streets to look, like a rubbish tip, end up having to pay through precept for bigger bins. So the bins are there, admittedly, to some degree, but there's limits to how far a parish council can afford to keep going down that route. The extreme example, which the former Craven District, now North Yorkshire's waste management do help to some degree at Stainforth, is where you've got big skips full of rubbish, but it doesn't get into the skip by the people who drop it. It's people who go and volunteer and go and take their time out, residents. So, you know, there's a financial impact on residents because of their policy of not having bins in the national park. As I say, there is a social value element, because people that, you know, we are all proud of where we live. It's a beautiful part of the world, and we'd like to keep it that way. So anything that can be done to mitigate the impacts of visitors brought in by, for example, by people like the National Park, who it is one of their missions to bring visitors to enjoy the national park areas, and that's laudable. It really is. You know, I wouldn't blame anybody for wanting to come up here and visit. We just want them to be a little bit more responsible when they do it, and show the due respect to the area and the people that live here and pay the price to live here.
And I suppose the follow-up from that with littering is it is the duty of the local council. It's not the duty of the national park. We do street scene. I've got Councillor Wright and then Councillor Cunliffe and then Councillor Etheltine.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, say in Craven, we've got to welcome tourism. Tourism, as in other parts, it's a big income stream for a lot of businesses. And I honestly don't see how we can control the behaviour of people that are coming, you know, and putting the bottles into the ground and then smashing it. You know, if we've got the bins, the same idiots will be emptying the bins for the fun of it, you know. So I really don't see how we can control the behaviour of them. And, you know, what we can do if we take this forward. You know, any suggestions on that? But it's a bit like the speeding. It's up to the people that are breaking the codes, isn't it? And you know, I agree that there is a problem. Residents don't always like the visitors because of the actions that they do. But at the same time, I'm sure from a financial point of view, they've got to be welcomed.
Councillor Conley,
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that point. We can't control people's behaviour, but you know, we have just today been talking about where the second home council tax premiums going to land, and I do support it being used to fund social housing, but at the same time, I do think the communities that are most impacted by second homes and tourism perhaps should be seeing some of that additional revenue, and it could be put towards the cost of the bins or some infrastructure that might improve, you know, or at least help repair any impact that, you know, tourism brings to an area. My second point is that we now do have a destination management plan, sorry, which does support or set out in its policy the need for sustainable tourism. So part of that will amount to attracting or marketing to the right type of demographic or sector in terms of tourism, those who are looking to walk, surf, perhaps not impact the natural landscape and negatively, but sustainability also means promoting areas which at the moment have not been promoted before and detracting the attention from areas which have been over promoted. And we have in the county, I think, had a lot of focus on Harrogate and Scarborough because those are the only two regions that really had an active tourism body. And it's really important, I think, that we ask now the tourism body to focus on all the areas that haven't been promoted in the past to help sort of dilute the focus.
I think one thing that I've become aware of this week, the second home precept increase for those parishes that precept, they get an increase because they're getting double back on there. So one of my parishes that is really heavily second home has seen quite a big increase. They're choosing at the moment to basically keep council tax static in their area with that increase in precept. But so the local residents are actually getting a benefit out of that, but only in the areas that precept. Obviously, those that don't won't. But where there are second homes and there's plenty of them, it can be quite a considerable increase. But that's it. That's an aside in a way, but it is something that is going into those areas. No, because we budget. It's what they call the council tax base, and the council tax base has increased. So when we increase ours, we get so much more. But the parishes also increase on the same council tax base in their area, so theirs goes up. It's a bit of a technical thing of how you do council tax, but it's leading to that. So those that have more second homes and precept will have a higher council tax base, which means that if they put £1 on a house or £1 on your council tax, they might get 50% or 10% more of that pound will come to them. Councillor Heseltine.
Observing local members' attitudes over 40, 50 years, and I've never seen a day when district councils were ever friendly towards national parks, and I never saw a day when district councils, borough councils were friendly towards North Yorkshire County Council. It was always very much, North Yorkshire County Council is the big bad wolf, and we're the poor local people that have to struggle. I thought those days were behind us, and I thought we'd seen the last of national park bashing. but perhaps we haven't. I, for one, I welcome sharing our beautiful Yorkshire Dales landscape and our heritage with those poor people who see their urban lives as drudgery, and if they can escape to the Dales or any national park for a week or an odd day, and they spend the money locally with us, then I very much welcome them helping our local economies. We are one nation. We are one nation, and we must share our good fortune with others who don't have that on a daily basis. So let's be working together and stop bashing national parks.
Councillor Staveley, to come back as your.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know there's a few national park fanboys in the room, so it's a tough crowd in some respects. But you know, we're pleased by consent. You know, we're not talking about forcing people to do things. We're talking about encouraging them to do the right thing and then enabling them to do the right thing. So far as the tourism goes, I think we all value tourism, but do be careful not to damage the thing that we cover so much by allowing anything to go in the name of tourism. Because if it gets to a point where people don't feel comfortable, as Councillor Conley-List has articulated, you can damage your brand. You know, you don't want to get to a situation where, I mean, I don't know, Blackpool once upon a time was very popular. Now I think you'd struggle to get people going there kicking and screaming on the whole because its brand has degraded somewhat. And I think we've just got to be very careful that we don't just turn a blind eye for whatever reason, whether it's national park bashing or not. The national park have a big influence on tourism. That's why they're noted in this. And as I say, as you quite right, you'll know, Councillor Heseltine, my division has got quite a few of these, what you might call honey pot sort of destinations. And that's where the impact is felt. Funnily enough, those businesses in the immediate area don't always get the full benefit of that by any means. Certainly when you look at the footfall in those areas, you'll be expecting a lot better return. But that's an aside, really. What we just want to do is share the national park with people who are prepared to share our values and show a little bit of respect for the area, because we don't make a mess of our area. You know, we talk at great length about having a planning process that preserves and improves the area. So it's the same principle. You know, we want to make sure that it's there for all to enjoy, including the people who live here. And as I say, if we can nudge in the right direction, encourage those in a position to do that and aid that, then I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing. Call us a critical friend. That was certainly the intention of the original report going forward. So, and as I said, it goes right across the piece, because I mean, throughout the county, there will be other areas who have similar concerns, I'm sure, from their residents. Okay.
Very quickly, it's not just affecting the rural areas, because there is another organisation that had a recent policy to remove their litter bins. They were called the Canal and River Trust, and they removed all their litter bins. And that's had an impact on delivery of our council services, because suddenly you've got council bins that are now full and having to be emptied on a much more regular basis. So when organisations take these decisions, they should kind of, well, if nothing else, it should be out there in the public domain to say, this is the reason why that bin might not be being emptied, or this is the reason why there's more litter in that particular area. And I don't think there's a problem in holding these organisations to account and asking them to put something in place to mitigate. I was part of that review, and it was very interesting, and we did have a really good debate at the time to work.
So, it's way of a solution to the debate that's continuing on, and I'm not sure that we're looking at this from an area committee perspective. So it's our area. I'm not sure scrutiny. Is it possible that we ask the national parks to say what they're doing in mitigation? Because I do know work has been done, you know, wardens and things like that are made to go to honeypots and stuff. So maybe get the national parks either written response or via Teams, or to come to the meeting to explain what they're doing in way of visitor management, really, because that's where we're looking into.
just the recommendations for various bodies that we use. We update on those bodies, on the recommendations that we made.
Right, so,
That would be a logical step forward first. And then move side what we want to do. Maybe side, maybe not.
is that all right then, that we go to get an update from these bodies on what they're doing on their role with visitor management? Councillor Cunliffe-Lister.
Yeah, and sorry to bang on about the DMP, but I would like an officer to come and tell us what they're going to be doing to promote the area generally. It's not just the national park, it's about, say, for example, on my patch, Massam's always been underrepresented because it's fallen under the shadow of Harrogate, for example. Fountains Abbey is a, well, UNESCO World Heritage Site and that never used to get a mention. And I'd really like to know now what the, how the DMP is going to be delivered with regard to promoting our area better.
So over to you. That which brings us neatly onto the work programme, because that's obviously an item for the work programme, isn't it? Do you want to go on that, David?
Just before I do we want to set up a working group for the impact of tourism, or are we happy doing it at full committee? And then, yes, is there anything that you would want to add to the work programme? If you think of anything, then obviously just let me know.
And so moving on then, can we go exempt, please, from members of the press and public? Who's actually delivering this? Right. Just to say we're going exempt because it does carry personal or business financial information. That's why we've gone on to pink papers. Right. Who we're looking for?
That one there, thank you. Really like to see from it. Just give them a call and see. Stop the recording.
Is that?
Just stop the recording.
Oh. Good afternoon, Adam.
Hi guys, good afternoon.
Have you stopped the recording? We've just got to stop the recording, Adam, before we start doing this.
No problem.
Simon, can